4 million years ago on the planet Earth, two brothers started watching Transformers media, and now they're going to make it your problem.
Hi, I'm Hayden.
And I'm Frankie.
And welcome to BroBots in Disguise, where we are going through and discussing every episode of every major Transformers cartoon.
You notice each time we record, it changes. Today, we are continuing with the Generation 1 cartoon, episodes 11 through 13, The Ultimate Doom, parts 1 through 3, and episode 14, Countdown to Extinction, released in 1984.
So these 4 episodes show how Megatron brings Cybertron into Earth's orbit, the destruction it causes, and how the Autobots stop the threat and deal with the fallout.
The absolute madmen. Now, the previous episode of our podcast transformed itself into a bit of a monster.
It was terrifying. It was worse than Autobot Spike.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Exactly.
As fun as it is to... Let me start that over. As fun as it is... I wrote this, I should be better. As fun as it was to so thoroughly dissect each episode, we've realized that for various reasons, it's just not a sustainable model going forward. Unfortunately, we're just not going to be able to discuss everything we want to about an episode, which is, usually everything about the episode.
All of it.
Instead, we will focus on just a few things that we thought were most important to us about the episode, along with some small fun moments. In the future, this will let us get through more episodes at a time, especially as we tackle some of the lengthier series.
There's so many bits and pieces of episodes that it's just like one single scene that I can't let go.
Yes.
And it just grabs me. I'm just like, oh!
Well, that's what, our notes are for. But
Yeah.
now we've restricted ourselves to about around 10 notes per
We need a single
each cartoon episode.
We need a single alternate mode, not.
We're not six.
We're not
six
six
shot.
shot. We're not 6 We're not any of
six
the
gun
septiformers.
Septiform.
But the streamlining we did in the last episodes just kind of became like a big stumbling block. So we're gonna go back to recapping the cartoon episode in its entirety before we start dissecting it. But we'll also be doing an even more condensed synopsis to not slow us down any further. We really do suggest anyone listening with an interest in enjoying the full story of each cartoon episode, you can go watch the corresponding Transformers episodes before listening to our podcast episode. We'll try to let you know how to view them as often as we can. It can be kind of difficult. Some are like scattered distribution. Like the original series is mostly on YouTube. But
the original series, Generation 1, fortunately, is the most watchable series in existence right now for some reason, which is great because it's fantastic. It's hilarious.
I think some of the more recent stuff is widely available on YouTube as well.
But then there's some of the anime series that are a little harder to get a hold of in
proper legal methods.
But we did enjoy our new segments, though. So those are sticking around. And if you didn't enjoy those segments, then
go listen to a different podcast.
Yeah, whatever. With that, let's get started. So recap, story, and character.
Yeah. And like I said, at the time of this recording, these Transformers episodes are available on the Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel, as well as on DVD and several other streaming services.
Yeah, just a cursory Google search will help you.
Right.
But The Ultimate Doom.
Part 1.
Yeah, the first 3-parter that we've had since the beginning of the show as well.
The first official 3-parter.
Yeah.
That have Part 1, Part 2, Part 3 in their name.
And then they have also the recap or the intro at the beginning of Part 2 and Part 3.
Right.
From
and the next
narrator.
time. Yeah. On the cliffhanger endings.
Which I really enjoyed. They felt very like radio from the 1920s, pulp action.
What's going to happen at the adventure serial sort of thing. Yeah. And I always forget that Ultimate Doom is one of the multi-part episodes that actually has subtitles to the parts
Yes.
of the episodes.
Which I was not aware of until started watching.
Yeah, even though we had that pamphlet that came with our DVD from Shout Factory, I think,
Yeah.
that said the subtitles on them, I didn't realize it until I was looking for screen grabs on the Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel,
right,
that they had subtitles, and then I went to TF Wiki, and apparently the subtitles come from the scripts. They don't actually show up in the episode.
Yeah.
I don't think... Do the title cards even show up in these episodes?
I don't think so. Not
kind of
in these
interesting.
ones.
'Cause
These
a
ones
lot
are
of
very
times they
crammed for time as well. So.
In some parts, and in other parts, they are also really stretched out.
True.
It's interesting, but we'll get into that.
Anyway, The Ultimate Doom Part 1 is called Brainwash. So Megatron and his human ally, Dr. Arkeville, kidnap Sparkplug Wiki. The Autobots rescue him without knowing he has a mind-controlling device implanted on him. Sparkplug sabotages them and leaves with the Decepticons, and then Megatron has an army of mind-controlled humans help him create and defend an enormous space bridge that brings the entire planet of Cybertron into Earth's orbit. Yeah. So let's get into
what an
the weeds.
Ambitious, absolutely ambitious story.
Yeah. There's a lot in this.
Unfortunately, well, I mean, it depends on how you look at it. In my opinion, and we'll talk about this more when we get to it, but this story arc, it starts out kind of silly and then gets really like intense, and then it ends really silly.
Yes.
But,
and then it's like, well, there's an epilogue as well, but that's also pretty silly.
Yeah, it is. But
standout for me is there's like, well, one, there's a lot of like tactics at play in this first episode that really kind of make it feel like a war.
Right.
But the first one is a diversion.
Megatron does have a plan in this.
And it feels like he's had this plan for a while.
Right.
But it starts off with a diversion towards I can't remember what the actual peninsula is called in the episode. It's like the Bahar Peninsula or something.
It was
off the coast of Malabar.
Yeah. Which actually, if they're saying off the coast, that to me sounds like it's on an island.
Yeah.
But maybe they said on the coast.
Yeah. But
yeah, we actually start out with this attack on a Maharaja in India, who has set up a solar power plant around his palace, which is kind of a neat little world building thing.
And I just love the.
And he's also apparently the only person in his palace.
He's also,
which is just one giant room.
Yeah. He's the only one in his palace. It looks like basically the Taj Mahal. Inside is just this super out of place giant piece of tech computer powering his solar facility. The narrator says he made it as a gift to his people.
Yeah.
He's also ginger and white.
Well, to be fair, I think, I'm not an expert, but I think that ginger can crop up in Indian sort of that region of the world ethnicities.
Probably. Maybe.
And people can be pretty light-skinned also.
True.
But yeah, I mean, chalk that one up in the animation department.
Yeah.
The character design. And, he probably changes between frames all the time. At least it's not that one guy who was black in one shot, and then the next angle he's white.
Yeah.
It was in a different episode.
Like,
actually, that happens in this episode, too.
I think so. But Decepticons...
Or the next episode, maybe.
Yeah. But the Decepticons attack the facility.
I think it's so funny how the Maharaja says that the power's dropping before the Decepticons actually attack, which means that when they flew over the top of the solar panels, they immediately started losing power.
It kind of makes you think about, like...
Just like, if a cloud goes in front of the sun, you're going to start losing power.
Just like, It's like, maybe it wasn't the most efficient.
Right.
But it does make me think, like, that's been kind of a recent thing with, like, say the Godzilla movies where creatures emanate like an EMP field and stuff.
Yeah, and that's also something in the Michael Bay movies, I think. Didn't the Transformers have
I
like
think it's
some
like
sort of electromagnetic signature or
I think
something?
the 2007 one they like wreaked havoc with some electric stuff.
Well, I know Blackout had the blast.
Yeah,
but
he's got an
they
EMP,
had
but-
some sort of like ambient radiation or something
Yeah.
that they used to detect them.
they were a lot more fuzzy with radiation.
Right. Anyway, so it's interesting that when the Decepticons say that the Autobots have been successfully diverted, which they show up on water skis, not skiing in robot mode, but in vehicle mode.
Yeah, like their tires are replaced by jet skis, essentially.
Right. But the Decepticons tell Megatron that the Autobots have been successfully diverted. And it's like, yeah, they've been successfully diverted to the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But Starscream points out that this is kind of a waste of energy, which he has a point because the Decepticons had to fly all the way to the other side of the planet
Yeah.
to get the Autobots to go to the other side of the planet.
Yeah, it's never really established what ocean the Decepticons' base is in.
Right, but it's assumed to be kind of because they built not too far away from the Autobots when they created their ship. Now, they were practically in orbit when Mirage sabotaged.
They could very well be in the Pacific.
I believe it's called the Victory, is the ship that they build
okay.
in that episode. In More Than Meets the Eye part, well, through that story arc.
Yeah.
But anyway, but yeah, generally it seems like they probably crashed in the Pacific because that would be closer to where the Autobots arc is.
Yeah.
And they built, it seemed like they didn't build too far away, but we never really see the amount of time it takes for Transformers to travel.
True. It's always
They're like, we got to get here in 2 hours, right? And here, where they're...
we got to get to the South Pole in 2 hours. Let's drive.
Right, exactly. And the Decepticons can fly, so, they could be pretty far out. That's a good thing that we should research one day.
So, then we kind of get a very abrupt introduction to the man of the hour, the star of this episode.
Yes.
Dr. Arkeville!
Dr. Arkeville!
Which, brilliant name. Literally arch evil.
Right, basically.
Arch
villain, arch rival.
So, he's literally just in the room with Megatron.
Yeah.
He's already evil. Like,
right.
This isn't really like the fall of Dr. Arkeville or anything. He's already obsessed with like mind control and slaves and everything. He just has a cyborg arm with fabulous nails, I might say.
Yes.
And a little helmet, like his skull cap is replaced by this helmet with antenna that coincidentally look like devil horns.
Right.
The Transformers are not a mystery to him, which,
right.
Granted, they're not a mystery to most people in this setting.
I mean, it's kind of established at the end of More Than Meets the Eye that they made themselves public to the world governments. Yeah. But yeah.
But he's significant in that he's already established contact with the Decepticons, and has earned enough trust for Megatron to share resources and plans with this man.
Right. Of course, Megatron's just using him, as we'll very quickly see.
Right. But to get into the upper echelons of Decepticon authority to be essentially alongside Starscream or Shockwave.
Right.
Is impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that they just introduce him like that, he just starts in the Decepticons' fold.
Right. And I just love the idea that he was just already out there. Like, Earth had its own villains before the Transformers woke up, right? The Transformers have been active for maybe a few months now, right? Arkeville has probably, and we'll see this in the epilogue episode, that Arkeville has probably been active longer, like, at least since the 70s,
He's
right?
also old. Like...
Yeah. So, like, he feels like one of those classic, like, you remember the original or one of the early Superman cartoons?
Yes.
Where there was just, like, this mad scientist
There's
of
just
the day.
a guy on a mountain who just so
Right.
happens to have a robot army.
That's what Dr. Arkeville feels like. And I
Yeah.
just love that he teams up with the Decepticons as soon as he can, right? And that the Decepticons are like, hey, this guy's got some good plans.
Yeah.
let's use him.
And
right?
it feels like he's only in these 4 episodes.
Which
like,
is
never
a
shows back
shame
up again.
because of the way that they leave off his story,
Right.
you know? I'm sure
because he could have come back.
Right, and I'm sure that in all kinds of other media, like comics and short stories and stuff,
Yeah.
he's been explored. His TF Wiki page is a little longer than just these.
Yeah,
4
he was
episodes,
in several manga, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
But shades of he kind of establishes the idea of, well, Autobots team up with humans. Why can't Decepticons?
Yes, and I do really like that.
Yeah, and that gets explored in later shows.
Yeah,
as
especially
well.
since the Decepticons are supposed to operate through deception.
Yeah.
And it's possible that a lot of the stuff that happens when the Autobots and Decepticons are fighting, a lot of times it takes places in uninhabited areas. So, like, and they don't show that news people come around very often unless it's a specific plot point, right? And this is set in the 80s before people had cell phones where you could just record anything.
You can get away with a little bit
so
more.
the actual, like, and I feel like this discussion belongs in Megatron's master plan.
True.
A lot more. And we'll get to that.
These kind of connect.
But it is totally possible that the Decepticons could trick Earth people, you know,
right,
into helping them.
Misinformation.
But in this case, Dr. Arkeville is just straight up, you know, he's already one of Earth's villains,
like,
you know.
I know about you. I know you guys are evil, and I want in.
Yeah.
But I know, I think it was the Earthspark series has a character.
I wonder if he was supposed to have any relation to, like, Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe or something.
It's kind of the same flavor sort of thing. He feels like he could be a G.I. Joe villain.
Yeah.
But I know that there's a character in the Earthspark show called Dr. Mandroid.
Yes,
who,
the most recent series.
One of the writers on the show specifically said that he's kind of a spiritual successor to Dr. Arkeville.
Nice.
And that, you know, you can see that Mandroid has a metal arm.
Yeah. And I think in the Rescue Robots series, there is a Dr. Arkeville-esque character.
Yeah.
Right? So his Arkeville's archetype, crops up throughout Transformers, well into the modern era.
He's a foundational character.
Yeah. So, yeah, we get to see that really start here. And also, another thing that we see start here is something that kind of reoccurs throughout season 1 and 2 of Generation 1 is that Megatron just has Optimus Prime dummies on hand.
Yeah. So
which is just the funniest thing to me for some reason. He has life-size Optimus Prime replicas.
Yeah. And
he also collects toys.
It's made doubly funny by the fact that the second that the Prime dummy walks into the room, the Seekers are all completely like, oh my gosh, it's Optimus Prime.
Right.
So convincing.
Now, this brings us to the plot point about Sparkplug. It seems like the Decepticons went to a lot of trouble to draw away the Autobots to the other side of the planet and then infiltrate the Autobot base and steal specifically Sparkplug when there's billions of humans on the Earth that they could have stole and used as their test dummies, right? However, I think it actually makes sense to go to the lengths that they did to specifically steal Sparkplug for the mind-controlling experiment. Because if they started spiriting away humans, the Autobots would have noticed that first and would have been on the lookout for it, right? And then they would have been showing up as these mind-controlled people. But if Sparkplug's the first, the Autobots only think that their friend has been captured and probably interrogated, right? So they don't know that he's mind controlled and they're not looking for it either, right? So it actually makes sense to go through all this trouble to steal him first so that they can use him as a spy and to sabotage the Autobots.
Right. They don't know that they have Dr. Arkeville, genius of science.
Right,
on their side.
right. Which also brings up an interesting idea that Dr. Arkeville might not be as big a threat at the time. Like, maybe he had been doing villainy, then he kind of retired, and then when the Decepticons came around and offered him world domination, he's like, now I'm coming back from retirement.
Yeah, he's also got Transformers tech.
All right, here's my headcanon. He's the Hayao Miyazaki of mad scientist, where he retires multiple times, but just always comes back for another one.
I think I'm done. Oh, wait, I'm actually back. No, I think I'm done. Okay, I'm back.
Right.
Oh, we are so back.
But the hypnochips are interesting because, in one sense, at first I was like, the title brainwash does not work for this, because brainwash means to, like, typically you use the word brainwash to mean that you've been putting these ideas into somebody's head until they believe them, right?
Yeah.
The hypnochips seem like just straight up mind control, like they have no power over their body, right? But Sparkplug looks so terrified, and Dr. Arkeville always has to tell him commands and, like, convince him to do things, right? Yeah. So it seems like Sparkplug is still aware of what he's doing and is being prodded into doing what Dr. Arkeville wants him to do. So brainwash actually does make sense as a title for the hypnochips.
We see, like, the ways that it's kind of showing through is unique to Sparkplug, where when he gets back to the base, he sabotages their weapons and stuff, but he's like, I gotta fix things, because that's what he would normally do in this situation. Like, Autobots got damaged, he's gonna fix them up. Right. He just kind of goes fix happy, and
he just starts fixing everybody.
Yeah, Arkeville has to correct him, and he's so, like, goal driven. It's less of, like, a full total, like, getting rid of the autonomy or anything. It's more of the ability to reason and perceive stuff is changed, and also his motivations are changed. Yeah, because there's a lot of scenes where he's kind of idealistically challenging, like, Spike and stuff.
Right.
Just like, join the Decepticons, be one of us. He seems like a fully zealotrous thing.
Right. That's not a just robotic. No offense to the Transformers, but that's not like a robotic thing where he's just a clean slate, that he's not just a meat puppet. Yeah. That's like actual brainwashing.
Right.
There.
And you see elements throughout the episode of, like, how much control the hypnochip does. It's like a huge spike of mental override. And then it kind of, like, wears out over time. And you keep having to, like, turn it up to 11, and then it'll drain down, and then turn it back up.
And that's why it's called hypnochips. It's because they're hypnotized. They're not mind controlled completely.
But it's a unique mind control implement.
Yeah, and how much they thought about this when they were writing the episode and how much just accidentally happened, I have no idea.
Yeah, a lot of it feels more of, like, let's dig into the drama of father versus son and how emotionally tormenting that is and stuff, but it also is, like, it has hidden depths.
As a filmmaker, I can confirm that, like, a lot of the best ideas happen by accident. Yeah. It's just as you're making a thing, you might have set out to make one thing, and then it just becomes better as you're making it. Right. And especially with input from other people saying, like, hey, what about this? And then you're like, oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. So
that's probably a lot of what happened.
So that's probably how we got to where we are with the hypnochips.
One thing I did like a lot about this episode, we mentioned, like, there's a lot of tactics on display. Diversion, sabotage, and
deception from the Decepticons.
A lot of that. But also, like, their plan, it feels like a big last resort. Like, this is their Oppenheimer moment of we're gonna get all of the energy we need from this, and then go through with it. The Autobots, Prowl comes up with a plan that feels like a pincer maneuver, where Some of them go in from like the ocean to
when they're rescuing Sparkplug.
when they're storming the Decepticon base. They specifically get the Brawn Windcharger combo.
Yeah.
Which is busted.
And yeah, that is
they like tunnel underneath. And
if you're ever building a what do you call it? A team in a game where you
like
have
a team
to
fighter or something.
yeah, like some sort of or stacking cards or something like that.
Yeah.
You want the Brawn Windcharger combo because that is just overpowered.
Yeah. And if you get 3, then you get Brawn Windcharger Skyfire. And you're set.
Yeah.
But like the fact that Brawn, is tunneling through, Windcharger's using his magnet abilities to pinpoint where they are. It's really tactically sound. It feels like kind of a war.
And I like how Prowl is the one that comes with the plan so that he can actually, because he's supposed to be like the tactician, right? So I like that he actually gets to do his function.
Right.
And that's something about, season 1 versus later seasons where like the Autobots and Decepticons do really feel like a military. You know? It's a cartoon military, granted, but they do feel more military.
It's a military where Bumblebee can grab a missile out of midair and just ride it around and send it back.
In mid-water.
Yeah. But the one thing I really do like about this whole episode is that it feels so much like Megatron. The second that he cracked like the space bridge as a concept.
Yeah. He's been thinking about
He's been like, I
He's
just need the resources.
over.
I just need the perfect timing to get this plan lined up. And it feels like it's been in the works for a long time.
And they do a good job of kind of building that up throughout this whole episode because it feels like something big is coming. First, there's coded messages. The Decepticons are going to this length of brainwashing all of these humans.
Which they normally don't care about.
They're building these giant energy pylons, which, I think that could have been set up earlier in the episode. But but when they are introduced, it's like, first we've got a few things like when Megatron says, "Hey, are you sure the space bridge?" I guess it was set up earlier in the episode, but we didn't see them constructing it because they did say that they were building a giant space bridge, and they asked if it was going to be big enough to transport its special cargo, air quotes,
and then he's even keeping some secrets from like Arkeville and presumably some of the other Decepticons.
Right,
as
even
well.
some of the other Decepticons might not know. And of course the Autobots have no idea. They're just getting little hints here and there. They're like, Megatron's building something big. We can tell, the Decepticons have captured Sparkplug and then recaptured Sparkplug, which also kind of feels funny that they sabotage the Autobots' base, right? And then they get in there and they're about to destroy the Autobots, which makes sense because Megatron wants to knock them all out before so that they can't tamper with his plan once it's in motion.
Yeah.
But also it's kind of funny that they just have this super dangerous foam for fire retardant that shorts
it's enough
out
to send the Decepticons running in.
Right. I'm like, why do you use this super... I get it. Okay, so there are some situations where humans use this, like, oxygen-sucking foam.
Yeah.
Right? To get rid of fire. And,
we use bleach.
Right. And it's not good for humans to be in that, right? But, like, the Decepticons are like, if we stay in this foam for, like, 30 more seconds, we're dead.
Yeah.
It's like, dang.
It's like, yeesh.
But, yeah.
You guys are fine underwater, but this foam is something else.
That's something. But anyway, yeah, so... And then it all builds up to a head when Dr. Arkeville finally asks, like...
What are you doing?
What are you doing? And Megatron's like, we're transporting Cybertron. He's like, your planet?
Yeah. It says it's going to wreak havoc on Earth.
Yeah.
But their plan is like, all of these natural disasters that are going to come from an orbiting body the size of the moon, just spontaneously showing up in the atmosphere, it's going to cause tidal waves, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, which the science on that may or may not.
Okay, so
accurate.
if you brought...
The tidal waves for sure.
If you brought something that big right up next to the Earth, the gravitational forces are going to have an impact on each other, and it is going to tear up both of the planets, right? So what's kind of a plot hole in Megatron's plan is that all of this destruction is happening to Earth, but no destruction is happening to Cybertron. And you would think that it would go back and forth.
Yeah, it's curious because you see in the shot when Cybertron enters the atmosphere, it like kind of reaches up and envelops it.
Yeah.
It kind of supports the idea that Cybertron has no atmosphere.
Yes.
So that might be why there's not much going on.
And yet, Cybertron does have atmosphere because it has clouds of acid rain that we've seen in previous episodes.
And
the humans can just breathe on Cybertron.
So it's not exactly the most scientifically accurate, but I feel like Megatron's plan of cause massive amounts of destruction and then harvest the energy from that is actually pretty rooted in, like, okay, that makes sense.
Conceptually, yeah, it does make sense. And I do think that scientifically, yes, it is going to cause all kinds of... Because the moon, the gravity of the moon, or not... the gravity...
There's tidal patterns from the moon.
Yeah, causes tidal waves or tidal patterns and whatnot on Earth. So... yeah, it makes sense that if you brought something at least that size to the Earth, that it would really pull on it, and it would cause all of this. And probably, it's mentioned in a later episode that as it rotates around the Earth in orbit, that it does just kind of trail the carnage around the Earth, rather than causing it all everywhere on the Earth.
And
all at
each
once,
rotation,
right?
it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
And probably pulling closer and closer to Earth.
Right.
And you think about that, and Megatron's plan is harvest everything.
Right.
How does he get it back? Or does he get it back at all? Is it just harvest the energy, get back to Cybertron, and then go somewhere else? Or...
That is another thing that we never actually learn about, because Megatron never says anything about it.
We never know about that. Which means it probably wasn't.
Yeah.
It's just like, get all the energy, and it's like, how do we get back?
Right. I think, okay, so in the Marvel comics, Cybertron is described as being a planet that's just by itself. It does not have a star that it orbits. Yeah. It just flies through space on its own course.
Essentially
probably
free.
At some point its star was destroyed and it was launched out into space. And there are, I believe there are actually planets that do that. They're like extrasolar planets or something like that. They just kind of
ride the orbits of other things.
Right, and they just float through space. They're not in any star systems. They're not in they just kind of float between stars.
I imagine we're making some scientific mind cringe.
Yeah. Well, all of Transformers makes any kind of scientist cringe, I'm sure. But, and we've been saying that we might as well talk about it now, because we've been saying Cybertron is around the size of Earth's moon.
Yeah.
Where did we get that from? Because I've always had this conception in my mind since I was a child.
Yeah, I think it was stated in the Marvel comics or something like that, or some other supplemental thing. It might have been Cybertron, honestly.
Transformers Cybertron?
Yeah, I feel like they might have said that at some point in the dub, but
maybe
I'm not sure. But it's just kind of one of those things that you.
I think it's because of this episode, because of the size of it and where it is.
Yeah, because you see it in relative position to Earth, and it is about the size of the moon, but
right,
a little bit smaller, I would say.
Right. So we see it in comparison. Actually, if it's we don't know exactly how close it is. I would say that it's probably in between the orbits, in between the moon and Earth. Somewhere in this episode, or at the end of this episode, right? So how close it is and how big it is, that's probably why I just assumed that it's about the size of the moon. Plus, if you think about how many Transformers there are versus an entire planet, Cybertron has an incredibly small population.
Yeah.
and yet everybody
like a couple thousand.
Yeah, and yet everything kind of happens in the same area or whatever. And in other media, it's always like, here's these cities. They're never,
Right.
you know. I recently actually just watched a YouTube video. I think it's Emperor Quamquat or something like that. He does a lot of Transformers Prime videos, right?
Oh, okay.
And he was talking about the same thing. And it just reminded me of this. And I thought
Yeah.
that it was...
Because Cybertron has gotten much bigger in
sometimes
recent media.
But sometimes, you know, it's been explored a lot more and developed a lot more, but it still seems like it's really small because you only have these small cast of characters, and yet they're... But of course, we know that travel time means nothing in Transformers.
Exactly.
So...
Numbers and everything are all relative.
Right.
But you also think about it from the perspective of, like, the classic setup of Transformers is group of Autobots led by the leaders, the two generals of this war, crash land on the same planet. Sometimes it maintains that scope. Other times it shows that the Transformers have a truly galactic scope and that they're interacting with other alien civilizations and stuff.
Yeah. Now, here's another thing I was just thinking of is scale. And of course, we know scale is absolutely a wreck in Transformers.
Yeah.
But if we take it with many grains of salt, the scale...
A whole container of salt.
Okay. In Transformers, the movie, from 1986, Unicron attacks Cybertron, spoiler alert. We see how big he is compared to Cybertron, right? And how he's standing there.
Yeah.
And we see how big Transformers are standing on Unicron, right? So if we compare the size of Grimlock to the size of Unicron's butt,
yes,
and then compare the size of Unicron's butt to Cybertron, Cybertron's not that big.
Exactly. Cybertron's honestly comes up to around, like, Grimlock's knee.
Right. And sometimes we can even see from, like, this... We can see the curvature of Cybertron.
Yeah.
And we can also see a character standing on the curvature of Cybertron. Yeah. And we compare the size of a Transformer standing on the curvature of Cybertron to the size of a human. It was compare the size of a human to the curvature of the Earth. Cybertron's not that big.
The more you think about it, the worse it gets.
Anyway, we're going into way too much detail. Stop me before I get out the math. Where are we with Ultimate Doom Part 1?
So, all of this to say, the horribly scientific inaccuracy of Cybertron entering Earth's orbit freaks Arkeville out.
Yes.
Which is pretty neat in that he's mostly concerned about his mind control plan coming through. Like, that's like his main focus, is getting that going. And the deal is that once Megatron is done and they leave to go back to Cybertron, Earth is under Arkeville's control.
Yeah.
Which is generally the bargain.
I love the line where he says, "What will be left of Earth when you're done with it?
I'll be
the ruler of a dead world."
Yeah.
And
Megatron's like, that's your problem.
Megatron's reply is like, "I'm sure you'll figure it out."
Yeah.
Which is just so good.
The Arkeville Megatron dynamic is exquisite.
Yeah.
Because it really does feel like a Faustian bargain.
Yeah. One quick little note, which I won't go into detail. I do really find it interesting. I said violent meat shields when Megatron uses the mind-controlled humans to attack the Autobots. I do find it an interesting thing that in a lot of media, mind control or possession often unlocks like this hidden strength.
Yeah.
Because like it's implying that when we're just normal, we're only using part of our strength because we need the rest of our strength to keep ourselves alive. But when we're being mind controlled, we're just putting everything into, one thing, So it's like there's no limiters, but you're gonna wear out the meat puppet quicker.
Further than the pain inhibitors would.
But on our final note for this...
I do want to bring up about the violent meat shields.
Yeah.
That's another part that feels like it was in the works for a while, is that all these episodes of observing what are the Autobots, like, tactics and stuff like that. It's like, humans, they're the weak link. Right. How do we exploit that?
Right.
foolproof. Like, mind-controlled humans that are all fully aggro against
Yeah.
Autobots and stuff. What can they do? There's a great shot where they're all crowded around. They just got, like, sticks and rocks that they've all picked up.
And the Autobots are just getting pounded.
And they're just kind of like, trying not to step on them and stuff. And it feels really, really, well thought out and in character for the Decepticons. Where it's like, geez. The hostage situation is exquisite.
If you ignore the shaky science, this is a really well-written episode. Which leads me to my probably my favorite bit of writing in this episode is that making Prime choose between Earth and Cybertron is just so... That is... Characters are shown in moments of lose-lose situations, right? That is just perfect writing to have Optimus choose between Cybertron and Earth, and it really feels like the climax of his character arc from the beginning of season 1 and the start of his character arc through to the end of season 1.
This is the first inkling I think we get of the fully self-sacrificial Optimus Prime.
This is like if you thought that the episodic nature of Generation 1 left out any sort of character development and overarching stories, Season 1 proves you wrong. Season 2 proves you right. But Season 1 proves you wrong.
But it's such a good line where he says, you'll be the one to activate the last pylon.
Right.
And he's like, yeah, right. And says that...
If you don't... Cybertron will be destroyed.
And
it's just... And then Optimus is like,
which he's right,
dang,
because
there's still friends on Cybertron. That's my home. It's an impossible choice because he has friends here on Earth. He has friends on Cybertron.
Right.
One is his home. One is he has sworn to protect. And, well, I don't know if we ever got
duty
a specific...
It's
implied that he's all about protecting Earth now. So, like, also that kind of, like, foreshadows, whether intentionally or not, the coming of all the 1985 toy line. They're still on Cybertron. And then also the episodes with, like, the Search for Alpha Trion, where we get the female Autobots. Anyway.
But, it's also not a bluff on Megatron's part, because we've seen space bridge tech and how unstable it is. That if one thing goes wrong...
you fall off that beam, you will be consigned to oblivion.
And I think at one point he says, like, it'll be hurled into the vacuum of space. Like, it's just going to go...
And then we'll have no contact with it.
Right.
And then plus, we've already established that... and they bring this up in the episode too, that space bridge technology relies on the planetary alignment as well. So if he waits too much
triangulation between the two.
If he waits too much longer, then the whole thing's going to fall apart.
Right.
And like, we've already activated 2 of the pylons, so it might actually cause some sort of subspace rift. Also, if you don't activate the other one. So all sorts of things can go wrong,
So Optimus finally making the call, and like, he does it reluctantly. He's like, fine, you win. And but then, like, the whole sequence from the second he presses the button and pylons ignite, you see the gate open and Cybertron's, like, dark shape comes through, the atmosphere wraps around it, starts pulling it in, and you cut to Earth, and it's hurricane force winds, and you see the destruction that's being across, like, the planet, and all of the Decepticons and Autobots reacting to it at the same... Like, they're locked in combat, and then they just kind of stop and look, and it's all of these shots of them from different places looking up at, like, Cybertron looming over the horizon. And against an overcast sky. And Megatron maniacally laughing, and he's like, yeah! And then Optimus questioning his decision and saying,
Yeah,
"Have
what have I done?
Have I saved Cybertron to only destroy the Earth?"
Yes.
And then that, lightning coming from Cybertron and hitting the Earth.
What
and stuff.
a
It's
cliffhanger!
Such a good cliffhanger.
Yeah. Also, that shot implies that Cybertron's like right up next against the Earth, which again, Cybertron is tiny.
Yeah.
But it's enough to cause problems.
Yeah.
But
it's such a tonal shift that happens at the end of this episode.
Because up to this point, like, there's been some dark things happening. There's been, this build up to this big event, but a lot of stuff has been kind of silly in this episode. We started with them skiing on water in vehicle mode.
And then, it's so apocalyptic. It actually lands the hit of oh no, we've lost.
Right. Which leads into the next episode. The Ultimate Doom Part 2, subtitled Search.
Yeah, it's not wrong.
I guess they're searching for something. They're searching for...
Sparkplug?
Sparkplug, I guess, yeah. Cybertron causes catastrophic effects on the Earth that the Decepticons and human slaves collect the energy from. Meanwhile, the Autobots and Dinobots attempt to mitigate the damage of the unnatural disasters. When Sparkplug is taken to Cybertron as a hostage, Spike Witwicky and a strike team of Autobots fly to Cybertron to rescue him. So, we're starting out... Doomsday is here.
Yeah.
The shot, I like this shot even better, where Cybertron is rising over the Earth like the moon or something, and the weather here is so doomsday, like the dark clouds, the lightning, the wind, the rain, the vibes, man. Ooh, and somehow I was so focused on that I missed this, that I didn't realize until I was checking it out on TF Wiki. The landscape completely changes.
Oh, yeah. They were in the desert, and now they're in, kind of the forest.
Right. But that's probably just because these episodes were being made at the same time as each other. There's definitely writing differences between these three episodes.
Right.
This one is the most, focused on this doomsday vibes.
Right. The whole first five minutes of it. Honestly, the first 15 minutes of this thing feel like they're all dedicated to just dealing with the consequences of this.
And the weather causes just as much trouble for the Decepticons as it does for the Autobots.
Yeah. And I love getting specific character reactions to this, but mainly Ironhide's. Or you see the actual shadow of Cybertron over this group of Autobots, and he says, "I never thought I'd be sad to see Cybertron again."
Right.
That hits.
Yeah, it just shows how attached the Autobots have become to Earth in the short time that they've been here.
Yeah.
Which is really quite incredible, considering that they can live for, millions of years.
Right.
We know that Shockwave lived... you might say, oh, well, they were in stasis or whatever for, 4 million years. Shockwave was awake
Yeah.
when they left.
The whole time.
And he was awake when they got up. But anyway... And just, all the battle at the beginning here, and I'll bring up just one of my favorite lines later when we get to the quotes section, but Sparkplug is fully on the Decepticon side. The Decepticons have won.
Spike's really just, kind of stunned at everything.
Yeah, and I sacrificed a whole note to mention Optimus's glowing trailer. And I see you did too.
Yes, because it's the first time that we ever actually get a definitive answer for where the heck does Prime's trailer come from every time he transforms, and where does it go? It just moves off screen.
Right, it comes
and then we never see it again.
Yeah, off stage. It just flies in, and then he has it, right?
This one, Optimus transforms, and we see, the line work... materialize out of a yellow glowing energy and then fades in.
And this is an effect that we see on other things, sometimes Transformers will materialize guns out of I believe it's called a hammer space pocket in later media. I think especially Transformers Animated had hammer space pockets.
And some of them that's also non-exclusive to Transformers as well.
Right. That goes to other things. I feel like the Bionicle in movies have that with
I think they do,
because they shove their swords into their back.
And it just kinda
sorry, their Toa tools
Yes.
into their back, and it just disappears.
Right.
Although you can actually watch. This is a sidebar on something totally different. I'm sorry. You can cut this out if you want, but you can actually watch Tahu in one scene, if I remember correctly. He pulls his swords out, and you could actually watch them grow.
Yeah.
So
frame by frame.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to Optimus's trailer. So we actually have a hint of where it goes. It might just collapse into hammer space.
Yeah. And which also brings up the question, like, what about Roller and the like, what happens to them? But
Spike is really out of it. And it really sells the defeat in this scene. After they've been chased off by sound waves, sound blasting, or whatever it is, which also scares off some of the human slaves, which is interesting.
Yeah, I like that it kind of fries the hypno chip's hold on
which
them.
kind of hints at and sets up what they'll learn at the end of the episode and what they do in the next episode.
Which also shows how powerful Soundwave is.
Right.
That he just blasts this and
it even takes out some of the Seekers out of the air, the Decepticon jets. As the Autobots are driving away in this like storm-torn weather and just torrential downpour of rain, Spike is in the back of Bumblebee, just completely out of it, and it really sells the mood.
Yeah, he's totally shocked at everything, and also the Sparkplug is specifically going out of his way to say, I'm not your dad anymore. Right.
So it's like he's lost family, but in a way that's worse than if they just died.
They're directly saying, hey.
Yeah. He might be losing the entire planet. And who knows what this is going to do to his friends, the Autobots. They could, they're all going to get wrecked.
They're kind of like scattered, and it feels like disaster relief, like in the middle of a hurricane and stuff, where they're all like trying to find each other and falling into crevices, and it's like, we gotta get him out and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then on top of all of that, Bumblebee blows his tire.
Yeah, and falls into a chasm.
Right. So, like, it's just, you're having a bad day, and then you get a flat tire, and it's just like, that's just the worst of it on top of all of this and stuff. But
I love the writing up until
creepy.
This first, like, commercial break is, like, top notch, because you have Doomsday.
Right.
I like how you said it, where it's creepy that the world is going down.
Right.
And you might get kidnapped if you're wearing worker clothes.
Yeah, because up to this point, all of the slaves, the mind-controlled slaves, have been people wearing that worker outfit that Spike wears.
Yeah.
Spike and Sparkplug wear. Which is like almost all humans on the planet, as far as we know right now.
Yellow boots, blue jeans,
beige
shirt.
Yeah, and the yellow helmet. But yeah, it's creepy that on top of the world ending, you could also just be captured for a mind-controlled slave.
Yeah, the cut towards the Decepticons, like, furthering their plan is that they don't stop getting more humans.
Right, because they need as many people as they can to collect this energy, because this energy, while it's predictable, if Cybertron's going around the planet and causing destruction wherever it's going, instead of just causing destruction all over the planet at once, it's actually predictable where it's going to be. So you just put slaves in that area before it shows up, and then you can collect the energy.
And it's kind of terrifying when it's just like these guys going to work, and it's like, there's a new planet up there. Oh no. And then a giant metal raptor comes and just abducts you.
Right.
Picks him up and then takes him to the Decepticon base. And the Decepticons are just kind of going through with the plan.
Yeah.
And Rumble kind of nonchalantly gets him into the pit, and then there's like the energy fence. And he just yanks one through it.
Ooh, yeah.
Disregard for like how it affects him. And he's like, he gets completely like zapped.
Yeah.
And is like, like that. And he's just laughing at it.
Right. It's interesting to me how cartoons, and this was pointed out in another sidebar, overanalyzing Avatar, the YouTube channel, they pointed this out in Legend of Korra, that in cartoons, you're not allowed to like show people like directly getting, beat up and stuff, but you can show them being tortured by electricity all you want.
He was like,
it's
they're
so weird.
fine.
Yeah.
It's like getting electrocuted is
all of this
pretty intense.
And then all of this builds up, like you've written. You can say that.
Yeah, it's you show this whole process of like up until this point we haven't seen the process of getting hypnochipped.
Well, kind of the experiment with
we see it with Sparkplug,
right?
But on a mass scale,
right,
is abducting them, putting them in essentially cages and stuff, throwing them onto a lab table, getting this hypnochip like kind of soldered onto the back of your skull,
right,
and then shuffled out into wherever, mindlessly harvesting energy from like machines and stuff.
Yeah.
And you see this and how terrified they were, and then just how deadpan they are after the fact. Then cutting back to Bumblebee and Spike, where Laserbeak tries to abduct Spike, and the cliffhanger that leads into the commercial is Spike getting abducted. You've seen this process, so now you know that's what's going to happen to him.
Yeah.
And then Bumblebee falls off the cliff.
Yeah, so he can't help him.
Yeah. Really good writing. Very suspenseful.
Yep. Of course, all of that is resolved, but...
Yeah. Literally within the next 2 minutes.
And then Dr. Arkeville has problems with Megatron.
Yes.
And Megatron copies his computer
he
onto
commits
Cybertron.
IP theft on
Yeah.
Arkeville's stuff.
So I should have put those patents in, buddy.
He's like,
See,
we just copied it on Cybertron.
This is the problem with being a mad scientist. You're not eligible for patents.
Yeah. Dr. Arkeville got Tesla'd.
Yeah.
But
it's
starting the rift between them.
Right. And he still believes that Megatron's going to give him Earth, and Megatron reinforces it will be yours. What's left of it?
Yeah.
Whoa!
He's having a grand time screwing Dr. Arkeville over.
But somebody who's not getting screwed over is the Dinobots. Apparently they have their own room in the Ark now.
Benefits and privileges. They're no longer in a
It's
a cave.
probably the cave that they...
But they just put a nice door on it.
They just put a nice door on it so that they don't wreck Teletran again. But they're all just like ready to get out. They're just at the door ready.
Like, okay, they probably heard what was going on.
Yeah.
But again, like, it's kind of odd that they... I don't know if you never see what's in there.
Right.
I like to think that they just kind of have this area to themselves.
Yeah,
where
it's
just
like
keep out Autobots.
Right.
This is our spot.
Dinobots only.
But it also still kind of feels like, are they putting them in a cage?
Right. But, I mean, that cave looked pretty
Yeah.
big. They probably turned it into a nice rec room with a pool table
Imagine
and a
it's
basketball
like,
hoop.
yeah, it's like a gym or something.
Yeah. You got big old dumbbells.
Right. But
they got to keep their bulk somehow.
It's a bot cave.
Right. I just imagine it like the Autobot base in Transformers Animated.
Yeah.
In the first season.
But again, they have to convince the Dinobots. Yeah. But they have to convince the Dinobots to help them.
It's interesting that Grimlock's just like, I don't care, man. Yeah. I'm a dinosaur. I'm used to this kind of weather.
me, Grimlock not care.
Yeah.
Is such a good line. But I love that this is what it says about Optimus's development from the previous Dinobot episodes. Is that, he obviously regrets having to do this with Cybertron, but he's like, what can we do? We can help mitigate the disasters.
Yes.
We can still do something.
Yeah.
And
I think that's also part of Megatron's plan, because he's like, all right, if we don't take out the Autobots, they're still going to be so busy trying to mitigate these disasters that we won't have to worry about them.
He has like 3 layers of insurance. He has disasters, he has violent meat shields.
Right.
And he also has the spark plug.
Right.
The human angle. Other than the violent meat shield.
Right.
A violent meat shield we care about.
Right. He has a main character.
But yeah, he's literally like, I don't care. Why should the Dinobots care about what's happening? Mm-hmm. And they said, you're on this planet.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I didn't think about that.
It's so
I guess
funny.
wow.
It's just like, if it blows up, yeah, you're right. I'd probably get flung out into space or something.
He's like, didn't think about that.
Yeah.
That's great. It also, it feels really great seeing them go up against a natural disaster. How do you stop a tidal wave? You throw the Dinobots at them.
Right. I mean, Yeah, they actually are pretty smart because they set up like
Yeah.
a fence and,
They're
and
not
they
dumb.
did like, trenches and stuff. But I do think it's funny that ultimately both the Autobots and Dinobots deal with natural disasters by just smashing things.
Yeah.
Because Ironhide shoots the rocks that fall into the lava to plug the volcano. The Snarl just runs into the tidal wave.
You don't know what to do, just shoot it.
But yeah,
We kind of mentioned this, but the plan is brilliantly executed on Megatron's
Yeah.
part.
but also just
It
kind
has absolutely no follow through.
of right because
It's like, we did it. What do we do now?
Yeah, the weather is trashing his base as well as the Autobots, and keeping him from taking a lot of the Energon to Cybertron, which Starscream comments, like, "Oh, great, we've got endless energy, but we can't get it to Cybertron."
Yeah.
But then also,
we just have a ship.
Skywarp, I think, says, requesting permission to land. Oh, hey, we got Energon to Cybertron, and then it wrecks their thing. So, yeah, good pros and cons,
Right.
I guess really the problem is that he's trying to send Energon during the storm, and he rectifies this in the next episode where he starts sending Energon after Cybertron has moved away and taken the storm with it, right?
He's kind of improvising through most of this.
Yeah, he kind of does. Which, I mean, in a natural disaster, you have to,
But a lot of that is what the Starscream character dynamic through this is rooted in, is that you have no plan.
Right.
You have no post plan.
Right.
But weirdly enough, the actual confrontation,
Which is-
the legendary backhands that he gives Starscream at the beginning of the episode is because he lets the Autobots escape.
Right.
And but it sets up the
and that incredible shot of him pointing at Starscream and telling him
with the lightning,
with the lightning in the background and stuff, and then Starscream's a little sneer
he's just
before cutting to the symbol flip.
Yeah, he's like
the emblem flip.
But it sets up very nicely the
Right.
Arkeville Starscream dynamic.
Right. Also, them using the humans, putting them on the Decepticon jets as insurance that the Autobots won't attack them.
Yeah.
Is pretty intense too.
Very, very well thought out hostage situation.
Right. And Dr. Arkeville is like, this is nuts, man.
Yeah. It's like, why are you using my slaves?
Yeah.
It really makes you think that he really just wanted slaves. That's all he wanted out of all of this.
But speaking of bases, I want to talk about the little base that's outside of the Ark that shows up sometimes, but not all the time.
Every once in a while it's there.
Every once in a while it's there, but you would think that it would be in the shots of the exterior of the Ark all the time if it was always there. Is it like some sort of like...
I think they mentioned a couple times that it's like Wheeljack's lab.
Yeah, he's too dangerous. Put him outside.
Yeah, all of his stuff keeps blowing up. He's a liability.
If I remember, it first shows up in More Than Meets the Eye story arc, somewhere in there.
I think it
because
does,
I think that's where
that's also where
Trailbreaker takes Spike to learn about the Autobots, right?
That's also where they take a chunk of the meteor fragment from War of the Dinobots.
Is it?
And it explodes.
Okay, it's the outside. I thought it was just another room inside the base.
I think it was in that base.
But then there's also one episode where, I think it's in More Than Meets the Eye, where they're repairing Ironhide and Ratchet's just doing it outside.
Oh,
Just right out there in the open.
Yeah, I found a good rock.
It's like, why didn't you do that in the little outside base or something?
Yeah.
But yeah, the little outside base kind of confuses me. It's just like this little extra little bit of the arc that's just over here.
Right. But I like that for Optimus's character, if we're going off of the War for the Dinobots, the pragmatic general into this is him being the sympathetic leader, is that it's not tactically sound to specifically find one human slave who's been taken to Cybertron and send a whole squad there.
Yeah.
But that's what he does.
Yeah.
And it's great little progression there that, it doesn't matter. We're in the middle of the apocalypse. We got to go get Sparkplug.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Even though they could have just captured any of the slaves from the from any of the work
because
sites.
that's like the tactical part of it. It's like we need to figure out how they're being mind controlled.
Right.
You could get anyone.
Right.
But they decide we're going to go get Sparkplug.
Right.
And, we care about him.
Yeah.
And it's also hilarious that he's like, we mustn't let the boy know. Let me know what? Spike, we think we're going to go after your father.
Yeah. He just immediately...
He's like, all right, whatever.
Yeah. And then, he... well, he doesn't say immediately that they're going to go after him. They just say that he's been taken to Cybertron.
Yeah. And then they all, like, kind of volunteer to go get him.
Right.
Great family dynamic of the Autobots.
Yeah, and I like this note that you've put in here that the team is a very similar strike team to the one that went to Cybertron in Roll For It.
Yeah, it's Ironhide, Wheeljack, Trail... Is it...
No,
not Trailbreaker. No, Trailbreaker's in it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's Divide and Conquer, isn't
Divide
it?
and Conquer, that's right. Yeah, I wrote it wrong. But it's Ironhide, Wheeljack, Skyfire, Trailbreaker, Brawn, Bumblebee.
Yeah.
Divide and Conquer, I think...
No, Ironhide's still on Earth, isn't he? He doesn't go with them.
He might not. But, yeah, it's a very similar team comp, and it's like, you guys have done a stealth op to Cybertron before, so...
Right.
Yeah, previous experience.
I don't think Brawn was there. I think they swapped out Ironhide and Brawn.
If Brawn was there, it would have gotten done way faster.
Yeah.
But
they wouldn't have had... If Brawn was there, they wouldn't have had to run out in the acid rain. He could have just punched his way through Cybertron back to the space bridge.
There's a great shot that you and I both made a note of. It's Skyfire flying towards Cybertron.
Yes.
And there's like a little music cue. It's a very soft, like, string woodwind combo that it's beautiful. And it ties in with when they land on Cybertron. Skyfire's like super excited to get out, and he's just like,
he hasn't been like the Autobots and Decepticons left 4 million years ago, right?
Yeah.
Skyfire was lost before the war.
Right.
So he hasn't been to Cybertron even longer than the Autobots.
Exactly. Like, he actually trips up Brawn, transforming too soon.
Right.
As he's getting out, and he's like, sorry. I'm so excited.
To be fair, he's been in stasis all that time.
Right.
But, yeah, same thing.
And then...
So he's probably been away from Cybertron at least 5 million years.
Yeah.
I don't know how long the war lasted, but
we've mentioned this before, but Bumblebee's line, where Spike says, it sure is different here on Cybertron, and he says, that's funny. To me, it just feels like home.
I do love that acknowledgement of the difference between, previously the Autobots have come to the humans' home, and now the humans are going to the Autobots'
right.
home.
And you see that kind of crop up. They do a really good job of that in the Transformers Cybertron show when the humans go to Cybertron.
Yeah.
And they're like super curious about everything.
Yeah. And in Prime also.
Yeah.
In Prime, it's much
dynamic.
More apocalyptic.
Yeah, Cybertron's in a way worse state in a lot of other shows.
Speaking of Cybertron, I think I brought this up before, but I just want to bring it up again, that the vast majority of Transformers, we only see Cybertron from one angle.
Yep. It's always the front. If that giant gaping hole is not in the bottom right of the planet,
then the glowing chasm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
yeah, great setup with Spike trying to convince Sparkplug to come back.
Yeah. And also this kind of pays off the setup with in the previous episode when Spike says that his dad's favorite wrench was used to sabotage.
Yeah, the wrench was
which is just, I don't know why it's the funniest thing to me. It's like, wow, this is dad's favorite wrench. Like, it's a wrench.
It's just a wrench.
I mean, I could see it being like, maybe it's his most useful wrench.
It's the one he uses all the time.
And it's like, yeah, it's...
It probably has engraved on it, Dad's wrench.
Yeah. And then he puts it on Cybertron and Sparkplug finds it. He's like, my favorite wrench.
Yeah. I like But that's another cool thing about the Hypnochip is that
We
he
do
still
see that.
recognizes
He's still
the
in
wrench.
that. Yeah.
He's still like, oh yeah, cool wrench. So it's not like completely overriding his personality.
Right.
But yeah, and the fact that it tries and fails and sets up good cliffhanger of like, we still haven't got him yet.
Yeah. And speaking of cliffhangers, let's take a break there for some water and bathroom if we need to, and then we'll pick up with Ultimate Doom Part 3 when we come back.
Yeah.
And we're back. So, a quick note before we start this one. I did a little research during our break, just to refresh my memory. And the team in Divide and Conquer is Bumblebee, Blue Streak, Ironhide, and Trailbreaker.
Ah.
The strike team in this episode is Bumblebee, Ironhide, Trailbreaker, and then we replace Blue Streak with Wheeljack, and we add Brawn and Skyfire. And then, of course, Chip is swapped out for Spike, as you said. Yeah. Just a little clarification before we start part 3.
Also, where's Chip during all of this?
Probably flying through windows in his wheelchair. Like in...
being tossed around.
Like in... that one should be Roll For It, right?
Yes.
Now I'm getting the names confused.
Yeah.
Whichever one he was introduced in. Anyway, that's just my favorite screenshot ever. It's so
through.
funny. Anyway, so not a lick of damage on him.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the current situation. Ultimate Doom Part 3 Revival. Would you like to read this one?
Yeah, Spike's strike team steals the mind control device information from Decepticon HQ on Cybertron, and Wheeljack is able to create a counter device. They rescue Sparkplug and escape back to Earth. The Autobots attempt to rescue human slaves from various Decepticon-controlled areas. Megatron prepares to take a final massive shipment of Energon cubes to Cybertron, but is blown up by the Autobots. The resulting explosion knocks Cybertron out of Earth's orbit.
I will have words to say about this when we get to the end of the episode.
Yeah. But,
where do we start? We left off with the Autobots being cornered by Sparkplug.
Must sound alarm.
Yeah, and the Decepticons show up. Shockwave and a few of the jets on Cybertron. And Soundwave is there too. Why didn't the Autobots just grab Sparkplug and run? Were they afraid that... I guess maybe they were afraid that he was going to be tracked or something.
Yeah, and also, he's still under the influence of the Hypnochip.
Yeah,
so.
But this is a great escape action sequence.
Yeah.
I really love just... They're cornered, they got this scrappy fighting energy, but then they're about to be obliterated, but then Skyfire comes through the door, lets himself in, and then they blow their way back out, and then the car chase and the aerobatics and the watchdogs following them around, which also the watchdogs, what are those? They kind of you pointed out that they kind of look like Reflector, and I agree. Maybe Cybertronian mode for Reflector. What a downgrade from like this hover car thing to a camera.
Yeah, I love.
But it's interesting. I always love interesting the background characters. Are they Transformers? Are they just remote control cars? You know,
you never see it.
Yeah, we don't know. But I do love background characters on Cybertron.
Right. I do love this whole sequence. Is just Braun is the absolute goat the whole time. He easily takes out 3 Decepticons.
Yes.
Improvises like an I-beam as a weapon that gets melted, and then Skyfire just bursts through the wall, and then it's great. It also shows that Shockwave's cannon is pretty powerful,
which comes up in later episodes too.
But there's just one absolute powerhouses.
One little note in here that I want to bring up is the when there's like this little peaceful shot of this doorway on Cybertron before the Autobots blow their way out of it. There's these green plant things that kind of look like they're made out of crystal, or maybe they're holograms or something.
I always thought they were like hologram things.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what they are, but I love them.
Yeah, they're so cool.
They're so cool.
It reminded me of Cybertron in Transformers Cybertron, where there's plants, but they're made out of like computer chips. And
I think
stuff.
that started in Beast Machines, actually.
Yeah, probably.
But anyway, I do like that where sometimes plants are made out of like mechanical things on Cybertron.
And you'll see it in other parts of the show, but especially in like the War for Cybertron media, they mention a lot of like there's a lot of plant life that takes the form of like crystals and stuff, which is it's really neat. Cybertronian biology and geology is very interesting.
There's a lot of green crystals throughout Transformers. I can think of the Heart of Cybertron, I believe it's called, from a later episode in season 2, which was the powerhouse for the Decepticons' original ship, the Nemesis.
Right.
And then the green crystals from the creature Chaos in that episode with Cup in season 3.
There's a prolific amount of green crystals, but all of them pale in comparison to the red crystals of Burma.
The ruby crystal mine of Burma. Yes. So moving on, I love how the Decepticons' decision to take control of the human slaves with their own computer on Cybertron leads to their downfall.
Yeah, because that's where the Autobots get the info from.
Yes. They hijack as you put it, laser disc.
Yes.
From Cybertron.
It's literally like
which to all you Gen Zers that don't know what a laser disc is.
Come on, we have the internet. We know what a laser disc is. A lot of our favorite media. I'm not Gen Z. I'm not.
You young
I'm not
whippersnappers.
Okay, look, I'm not Gen Z. I am not a millennial. I was blessed to be born in between the two, so I can avoid a lot of the stereotypes. But come on, a lot of our favorite media started in the 80s. We know what a laserdisc is. We know what a cassette is.
We also know what
we know what a VHS is. I grew up with VHS.
I
love VHS. VHS does not love me back.
We also know what a Google search is, so if we don't know what something is, we can figure it out.
Yeah. Anyway,
but it's hilarious because it's literally a giant Transformer-sized laser disc.
Yeah.
Not a CD not a CD proportional to a Transformer. A laser disc where it's like the size of the torso.
Yeah. But yeah.
Also, it's great because they get to Wheeljack's lab on Cybertron again.
Yeah.
And
it's totally different than the last time we were here.
Completely different. They get in, and it's like this little like airlock thing.
Yeah.
And
I thought it was
Ron's
an elevator.
like, neat layout, Wheeljack. It's just an antechamber. Spike steps into the room and is like, wow, you could work miracles in here. It is a square room with 3 monitors.
No, it is like an octagon.
No, it's nothing.
No.
It's essentially an octagon.
It's a hexagon, which means it's technologically advanced.
But there's nothing in it. There's no table. There's no, like, equipment. There's no, like, apparatuses or anything like that.
They do show it later on that there are apparati.
But it's just so funny that it's just
it's just the weird Transformer tentacle thing that zaps stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway,
tentacle reprogrammer.
I understand. But I always thought that maybe Braun was referring to that his garage door was on the side of the street and disguised itself as just a wall.
Yeah, I guess.
And so he has like this bat cave sort of thing where you can enter from any part of the city or something. You know?
like the concept
and maybe
of
that was
Wheeljack's lab.
I always thought that was an elevator that took them either up or down to his lab.
I guess that makes sense.
And maybe that whole building was his lab.
Unrealized potential of Wheeljack.
Right. But regardless, it's totally different than his lab in the previous episode, which supports my Wheeljack is Batman hypothesis. That it's
he just has little stations all over.
Yeah, all over Cybertron.
I like that.
All right, so then we cut back to Earth, where the Autobots are surfing the tidal wave.
Also,
on Transformer-sized surfboards, which is just the most hilarious thing. Even
no
more,
build-up.
Even more funny than the water skis in Part 1. But it could be a callback to the water skis in Part 1.
I was going to say, like, they make the water skis, and then, like, they're like, oh, well, it's inefficient to do it in vehicle mode. And it's like, well, we'll do it in robot mode and build a surfboard or something like that.
I love it.
But we also get, like, fantastic shot of Blue Streak like surfing faster somehow.
Yeah.
As he's going away from the tidal wave behind them, and he's like, flailing his arms.
My favorite part is that this is nowhere near the last time we'll see Transformers on surfboards or skateboards or whatever. Because, I mean, there's the little one...
Autobots are radical, man.
Yeah.
They're groovy.
There is so much so that one of them turns into a surfboard.
Yeah.
Or no, a skateboard in Armada. Okay, so just a quick little rundown of what I can remember off the top of my head. There's the Back to the Future skateboard, hoverboard in the movie.
Yeah.
That Daniel has for all of 10 seconds.
Yeah.
There is the flying skateboard that Optimus Primal has as a Trans-Tech one.
Or Transmetal.
Transmetal, thank you. Trans-Tech was the canceled line. Anyway.
This is just the TF Wiki, like...
Yeah.
looking at the backlog of TF Wiki pages.
And then, what's his name? Grindor in Armada turns into a skateboard.
Kicker uses the Star Saber as a skateboard.
Yes, yeah, that one I forgot. I knew there was somebody who used someone as a skateboard.
It's literally a legendary, like, god tier weapon, and he uses it as a surfboard.
Right. I knew that was in Energon somewhere. I couldn't remember who used who. Multiple times, Decepticons use Tidal Wave as a surfboard, basically.
There's
what
more.
else? There's more.
There's so many more.
But getting back to this episode, I like that you point out that Megatron has an obsession with hydroelectric power.
He uses the dams. He uses tidal waves. He like half the times that he figures out humans have like a dam, a hydroelectric dam.
He's like,
this,
I want
this
that.
is going to get us enough energy to get back to Cybertron.
Which, to be fair,
okay,
he's thinking green.
True. But at the same time, it's like there's nuclear power at this point. This is during like Cold War stuff.
Which might actually be why they don't mention nuclear power, and
why.
Instead you have the infinite generator in the next episode.
Yeah.
But
I just love that he's like, water going over thing turns machine makes energy. This is the greatest revolution of all time.
Because they don't have water on Cybertron.
That's true.
They have acid. They don't have water.
You know? He actually...
This is revolutionary to Megatron.
That's why he's fascinated by
Yeah.
That's probably why Starscream's also unimpressed by this plan.
Yeah.
Because he's a scientist.
He knows about water.
He probably would have thought about this.
Right. He's like... Because he and Skyfire have explored Earth. He knows about water.
Yeah.
He's probably thought about this and thought, it's inefficient.
Yeah.
And Megatron's just like, this is the greatest thing since bread. Well, whatever it would be, chopped Energon cubes.
Exactly.
The drinkable Energon that we see later.
Glug.
We'll get to that episode.
We also, like, this gets... Well, I do also... I sacrificed a point to mention. Rumble points out the tidal wave by... Instead of, like, using some sort of goggles or anything, he has, like, a visor for eyes.
Yes.
And they just... That's level with his face.
Right.
They just extend forward, like, Looney Tunes style, just... And we get, like, through his vision, and sure enough, he sees through, like, a visor shape.
Right.
And it's not magic hand tech, but I'd put it in the same echelon as that. Yeah. Just because it's funny.
Maybe I should have moved it to the magic hand tech. But I also want to point out that at this dam, we now see normal humans are being used. Like previously, it was if you were wearing the beige shirt and the blue jeans,
nondescript industrial worker,
right? You were going to be used for this, which made sense. But they've expanded their capture now to just normal civilians wearing average clothes.
Right.
Which I believe is the first time that we see this in Transformers, that
regular
there's
people.
Normal civilians.
Other than, like, in Dinobot
I know it's
creating the Dinobots. You go to the museum and you see regular people.
Oh, that's right.
But
You are correct. SOS Dinobots is the first time
you
that
see
we've
a
seen
punk
normal
metal
humans.
dude. Like-
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so this
But-
is not the first time that we see it, but anyway.
And also, like,
But now
that's
we
kind
have
of
normal
harrowing.
humans being used as slaves.
They've
too.
run out of industrial workers.
Right. And we don't
That's
know.
scary.
We don't know how many have been transported to Cybertron. There could
Right.
be a whole bunch of humans on Cybertron.
There could
right
literally be a lost colony of humans that are stranded on Cybertron by
Right.
the end of this
now.
episode.
Or they died when it got blasted out of orbit,
the
which we'll
the
talk
death
about.
toll is catastrophic.
You must send resources. You must contact me.
So this whole
Speaking
plan-
of contact, Megatron is warning Dr. Arkaville.
yeah, so Arkaville grumpy
Yes.
as always.
It's like
And Starscream's also like complaining about the plan and that it's inefficient.
right.
It's a waste of time.
Which honestly, a lot of these machines are one-time use that Megatron's built because
Yeah,
we
he's
see when
building
the
whole
tidal wave
facilities.
hits. I'm sorry, 2 times.
Yeah.
The first time it comes in, it works. Second time, it as Arkaville says, it smashes it like so many matchsticks.
Yeah. It's and it's cool seeing that no matter how strong the Decepticons' materials are, they still can't plan around the frequency of these tidal waves to where it just destroys it. But a cool little thing here is that Megatron warns Arkaville, he's like, don't associate with Starscream. It's small, but it also points to the fact that deep down, Megatron does have this little bit of him that says Starscream is a threat.
Mm-hmm.
His insubordination is a threat. I'll constantly put him down, but it's the idea of insubordination
Yeah.
that he has that's more threatening to him. And the fact that he's going out of his way to say to Arkaville, don't do this, is threatening him.
Mm-hmm.
It shows, 1, desperation.
Yes.
2, he considers Arkaville enough of a resource to put him on the same power dynamic as Starscream.
Yes.
He's very high in the Decepticon rankings at this point.
And then in the next scene, he says,
And-
he's of no further use. But I do like to see that Megatron has upped his game with the transportation of energy to Cybertron, because now he's got these giant shuttles that take huge amounts of energy, energon cubes to Cybertron, instead of sending them, 10 at a time via jet.
Via seekers, yeah. And then also Arkaville's little, perhaps Starscream is the one I've been looking for.
Right.
It's
What
pretty
is he
fun.
planning? Is he planning to undermine Megatron and stop all this or something? What is his idea here?
You could reason that he gets more slaves and more and more and more slaves, and then uses them to stage a coup or develop a hypnochip that can work on Transformers.
Ooh,
Which
that's
would be
interesting.
really cool.
Yeah. And we know that they are susceptible to that sort of thing because Megatron reprogrammed Bumblebee's memory chips in a
Yeah.
previous episode to lead the Autobots into that cave.
All right, cut this out if need be. But here's my pitch for Arkaville's
Return.
He uses
Season 4
Yeah.
Transformers.
He sticks with the Decepticons. He kind of plays it safe like Starscream.
Yeah.
All the while, amassing a secret force of humans that he uses to implant his newly developed Transformer hypnochip on certain Decepticons. And they plan it on more, and then more and more, like that. He gets this technology through Megatron at some point being damaged in the field and taken in for repairs. He steals that little reprogrammable snake that lives inside him and develops that hypnochip from there.
Right.
And then eventually attempts to take over. Does he succeed? Probably not. But it'd be pretty cool.
Yeah. That's probably you could write for the Japanese comic that continues to add more stuff to the G1
Yeah.
cartoon continuity.
Ooh,
What is that called? Legends or something like that.
He also fuels all of this through his infinite generator.
Yeah, yeah.
He's got plans upon plans.
Yeah.
He could do it.
But anyway, meanwhile, on the current plan, Megatron leaves when the Autobots show up, right? He takes all the energy with him, and it's just kind of this creepy moment where everything's been abandoned. The new tidal wave catcher thing,
just utterly destroyed.
It's utterly destroyed. There's slaves scattered all over the place. Probably a lot of them have died.
Yeah.
Because as we know, humans are squishy.
Exactly.
The Autobots
get knocked down.
Yeah, they're getting knocked down. They've got to they've got to start, helping rescue the slaves, and at the same time, Dr. Arkeville, it cuts to the scene where Dr. Arkeville is all by himself, just way out on this little spit of twisted metal, screaming for Megatron to come back. Yeah, he's been completely abandoned. And then Starscream comes up out of the water and grabs him and says that Megatron's through with you, but I'm not. And then there's this creepy version of music.
It's the Decepticon theme that's normally dun 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 dun, but it's long, protracted, super high pitched synth.
Yeah,
that's
it's
like
super.
Yeah,
like it's that. Super specific. Like it fits Starscream super well. It fits this creepy vibe, and it's never used again.
Yeah,
this is the only time it shows up, and it's so cool. It really nails this
horror factor of like, what is he gonna do with it?
Right. And that's just something that the whole middle part of Ultimate Doom, about halfway through episode 1 to about halfway through episode 3, and especially, this is probably why the middle part 2 is my favorite of the 3 episodes. There's just this creepy vibe that goes through the whole thing of just the doom and gloom, man.
Right.
It starts out kind of silly, and as we'll get to it, I'll have words about how it ends pretty silly too. But anyway, this is the pinnacle of all of that. I think that one of the highlights is Spike being out of it, but this part is like the pinnacle of the creepiness when Starscream kidnaps Dr. Arkeville.
It's foreboding.
Because everything's just left to rot. Yeah. Because it really shows the aftermath of, if Megatron succeeds, he'll get all the energy, take it to Cybertron, he'll have won and left the Earth in complete ruin.
Yeah. Thematically, Megatron's plan lines up really well with how Cybertron is going to, it's rotating and carving a wake of destruction and just leaving it behind.
Yes.
That's how Megatron operates.
Yes.
He carves a wake of destruction and leaves it behind. Takes what
he wants and just leaves destruction.
Yeah. He's an ultimate conqueror.
Yeah, he's
tyrant.
A means justify the end. Or, no, I'm sorry.
The
end justify the means. Yeah. But speaking of Cybertron, while we're on Cybertron, the Autobots rescue Sparkplug. And it's actually after Wheeljack develops a device to unhypnotize the
which is like a box flashlight.
yeah one of those emergency storm radios, flashlight generator things. It looks like a toolbox. Yeah, but it's actually quite a sweet moment, especially when they're in Skyfire on the way back to Earth after they've rescued Sparkplug.
That's like the heart of this whole story, is the Sparkplug Spike reunion.
Spike and Sparkplug being reunited.
But he says, you never quit on the one. It's like you always told me, Dad, you never quit on the ones you love.
Yeah.
And it's like, aw, like that. And Braun's unexpected line of just kind of smiling to himself and saying, mushy, but true. He reminds me so much of like a John McClane. He's like the 80s action hero.
Yeah.
And God bless Braun.
So, they're heading back to Earth, and so is the show, right? And I love,
this is where things get goofy. This is when we head back to Earth.
Starscream's plan. What does he do with Dr. Arkeville? His plan is to drain his brain for one Energon cube. And he doesn't even do that.
The funniest thing is that
It's so dumb.
this comes immediately after the most foreboding moment of the episode.
Right.
The creepy synth. What is he gonna do with this man? His plan is literally just. I mean, granted, it's a brilliant plan because it's Dr. Arkeville. He's got a magnificent brain.
Right.
It's drain brain energy from him. Theoretically, you could say that, like, well, maybe his, like, skull cap thing is, like, an advanced robot brain. And it's like, maybe he actually does have, like, brain energy. But it's attached to, like, a little pocket power generator, the size, not even the size of Arkeville.
Yeah.
It's not enough to fill it.
See, the Transformers actually went with what the Matrix could not. Because originally in the Matrix, humans were going to be being used. The movie, The Matrix.
Yeah.
Humans were going to be used as external memory or something like that for the massive computer, right? Okay. But they thought the producer or the higher up, somebody in the pipeline, right, thought, oh, they can't. Audiences aren't ready to understand that, right? They don't know enough about computers. So make the humans just batteries, right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's not enough electric energy in humans to power even one Energon cube. And Transformers understands that.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it comes directly after Megatron. It's like, now where's Dr. Arkeville?
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you abandoned him 5 minutes ago.
Right.
You said he is of no further use to you.
You copied the computer on Cybertron. You know how this works. Why do you need Dr. Arkeville now?
But it's him saying, like, where the heck is he? And it pans over to Starscream in the middle of just like...
Why is he in
like,
the same place as Megatron?
He's like scratching his head, looking at Arkeville, who's just glaring at him. He's just
like he's sitting on the toilet or something.
He's like, Starscream, you're a scientist. Why was this your first inclination of like, I'm breaking away from the Decepticons. I got a foolproof plan. This one guy.
I'm gonna drain his brain to power my army. What army? It's so dumb.
He goes from, like, his whole thing is like Megatron's too reckless. He's, none of his stuff is working. He goes the complete opposite direction and plays it way too safe.
The salt water from the tidal wave must have scrambled his brain. But anyway, so yeah, this also shows us that, yeah, they have been moving around the world collecting energy in different places, right?
Yeah.
And it's an oddly clear day that the world's going to end on. Because... yeah. Optimus says that the next... rotation is going to end the world, basically, right?
Yeah. Earth is going to break up.
Right. And also Megatron mentions that this is like going to be his last shipment. And the amount of energy that they've collected in this gamble, this absolute gamble of an operation, probably is enough to keep Cybertron going for quite some time. I figured that, multiple times throughout season 1, and this is probably the last great thing I'm going to say about this story arc. Multiple times throughout season 1, it has been a race to collect energy to send back to Cybertron. In fact, I have said multiple times before that the Decepticons do more to revive Cybertron than the Autobots do in season 1. The Autobots are so focused on stopping the Decepticons that they don't actually do much for Cybertron. Right. Megatron is actually trying to revive Cybertron, right?
Yeah.
And multiple times they've mentioned that Cybertron is running out of energy. Probably because the Autobots won't let the Decepticons send any energy to Cybertron. Now, to be fair, there's implied to be more people than just Shockwave on Cybertron.
Right.
Right.
And there are.
So it's possible that we see that later. But right now we're just being told and not shown.
Yeah.
Well, actually we see other Decepticons. So we know that there's other Decepticons on Cybertron. So if the Decepticons send energy to Cybertron, it will fuel the Decepticons to finish off what other Autobots are on Cybertron. Which maybe that's why we don't see them. They're all in hiding.
Yeah.
But it still stands that the Autobots are not doing anything to send stuff to Cybertron either, right? They don't have space bridge tech. They did not fix their ship for some reason.
Yeah.
And Cybertron is way far away, so they can't just drive there.
They could if they wanted to.
Yeah, and I do love that they can just fly there in this episode. Right?
Skyfire's the goat.
Yeah. Cybertron is implied to be, outside of our galaxy at the beginning of this episode, though it doesn't take them that long to fly to Earth in the beginning. I'm sorry, in the beginning of this story arc, but also in the beginning of season 1.
Yeah.
And then at the end of this story arc, it's within our solar system, probably. Right?
Probably. Yeah, like maybe around like Jupiter.
I always
or
assume
something.
that it was, floating out there around Jupiter somewhere.
Yeah.
But the amount of energy that they collect during the Ultimate Doom story arc and send to Cybertron is probably enough to keep it going all throughout Season 2. Because for most of Season 2, we do see the Decepticons still sending energy to Cybertron, but it's not the main focus of the story anymore.
Yeah.
Season 1 is all about sending energy to Cybertron. And after Ultimate Doom, it's not that big of a problem. It still needs to be done. Cybertron has not been completely revived, but I do feel like even though they probably used up most of the energy that they had gathered throughout the first part of Season 1 to bring Cybertron here, the amount of energy that they collected from the chaos was enough to keep Cybertron going for at least the rest of Season 1 and most of Season 2.
Yeah. Really, when you look at it like that, Megatron's plan actually succeeded.
Yes,
in
it
some
did.
way. It wasn't enough for him to conquer the universe,
Right.
but he partially succeeded.
Yeah, he does succeed in the one thing that I do believe. And, it's possible that getting caught in the explosion scrambled his brain also at the end of this episode. So that he's less about saving Cybertron and more about just destroying Autobots and conquering the universe. And he always talks about conquering the universe, but throughout Season 1, I've had this subtext of Megatron genuinely cares about reviving Cybertron.
Yeah. It's a threat
it is a means to an end, but he also genuinely cares about reviving Cybertron.
There's we've talked about it a few times before, but specifically the Transformers Devastation game. That's like one of the narrative cruxes of that thing. That's like the main theme is Megatron as a Cybertronian purist.
Yeah.
And beautiful line in that game is Cybertron's at the center of my universe. How is it not at the heart of yours, Prime?
Oh, yeah.
And
I forgot about that.
It's the huge question of and that also shows up at the beginning of this is, what do you care more about, Earth or Cybertron?
Right.
And that kind of narrative tension there, and that theme is really well explored in that game.
Yeah.
And it's kind of summarized by Prime at the ends where he says, well, we haven't really considered Earth our home this whole time. It's always just been the pit stop.
Right.
We're stuck here.
Right.
We've always been half of us has been wanting to go back to Cybertron.
Yeah.
While protecting it. So we've just been viewing Earth as an obligation this whole time.
Right.
But at the end of that game, spoilers, he basically says we need to consider Earth our one and only home.
Yeah, until we
to better defend it.
Right.
And
you're absolutely right. That is at the core of Optimus's character arc in this story.
Yeah.
Of the Ultimate Doom. However, it kind of falls apart at the end because I understand. All right, I understand. Optimus is overwhelmed with trying to stop these natural disasters from happening or mitigate their destructive potential, right?
Yeah.
But he has no plan. He says, Cybertron's next orbit will tear the Earth apart. But he isn't trying to stop it. He's just trying to stop Megatron.
Yeah.
Right? Which kind of goes back to the whole thing about Prime spends more time stopping Megatron than he does solving problems.
Right.
Right? And he has no time to come up with a plan. He has no concept of how do we get Cybertron away from the Earth, right? Spike just in utter desperation just starts shooting at Megatron's ship as
with Optimus's gun.
With Optimus's gun. Yeah. Optimus is like, we failed, and I'm like, you didn't try.
Yeah.
What was your plan? Were you gonna hijack? Was this your plan all along, maybe? Hijack Megatron's ship, fly it in between the two planets, and blow it up? What was your plan?
It probably was, because in the end, if you don't understand something, just shoot it.
Yeah. that is the kind of the Autobot way.
I do love... let's talk about this. It's the silliest thing. Is that
I hate this
Megatron has last shipment of energy. Oddly enough, he also says at the dam, when they're collecting the energy, it's like, ha ha ha, energy by the Astro Leader.
Yes.
And then Spike foolhardily says, no, we'll shoot down the energy that's in the ship, and the explosion will be big enough to knock Cybertron out of the orbit.
Yeah.
And Prowl is like, no, it'll take an explosion with the equivalent energy of 10 billion Astro Liters.
Right.
Same unit of measurement, so not bad. 10 billion is a lot.
Yeah, but apparently he's collected a lot of, hey, we can actually, if we did the math, we could actually look at, because it shows how much Energon cubes, how many Energon cubes Megatron is carrying in that ship. Just
how much energy is in a cube.
Right. We can calculate how much that is, with this.
You have to factor in hydroelectric power, like how much is roughly generated from that.
Right. So we can figure out what an actual...
We'll do some research, and the next episode we'll try to come up with
Will we, though?
An actual thing. No.
But anyway, if there's some math nerds out there who want to tackle that, there's your episode.
They shoot down Megatron's shuttle from the ground.
He's
already in the orbit.
I love how the first thought... everybody who thinks Spike is just going to shoot Cybertron until it goes away.
Yeah. but they're like, oh no, the energy on the ship, it's enough. And I love that Spike takes the shot, and then Prowl's just like, all right, whatever.
Yeah, he figures that out immediately. And they blow up Megatron's ship, which knocks Cybertron out of the orbit. How does it not knock Earth out of its orbit too? If that explosion is big enough to knock a planet out of orbit...
Sends Cybertron over to Pluto... Sends Earth
straight
to the sun.
How do they shoot all the way from whatever island they're on? Hey, maybe it's the coast of Malabar.
There you go.
All the way back to... How do they shoot all the way from there into the upper atmosphere where Megatron is? It just... And then the animation of Cybertron just moving out of Earth's orbit.
It is the funniest thing.
It's so dumb!
It is the timing of Spike saying, it's working! Cybertron's moving out of Earth's orbit!
Yeah.
And Cybertron just books it.
Yeah.
It goes, whee!
And then
super fast.
And then we have in reverse all the animation of the destruction from the first episode when Cybertron first shows up. Right? And Optimus even still mouthing something, standing where he was in that previous episode instead of on the beach. And I don't know, man. It's just the silliest end to this.
They just realized they really needed to wrap this up.
Yeah, they're like, we gotta finish this. How do we finish it?
Yeah.
Well, we blow it up, of course, because that's how we finish things.
But it is kind of cool because it's a cyclical thing. More Than Meets the Eye ended with Megatron presumably being blown up.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, hey, sweet, we don't have to worry about him anymore. And then, as I like to call him, Skeptimus Prime returns and, says, I wish that were true.
Right.
And then, Megatron in the wreck swears revenge and then floats off.
Yeah, of course.
How does he
survive that? I don't know. But anyway,
then,
great story, shaky science, silly ending,
paper thin plot.
yeah. But I do like the Ultimate Doom, and this does feel like sort of the Avengers Endgame sort of, or not Endgame, Infinity War sort of big event thing's gonna happen. Everybody's gonna be scarred after this, and then season 2, everybody's just back to normal.
Yeah,
I mean,
Well, it
But-
does follow the tradition of More Than Meets the Eye and Transport to Oblivion in that there's an epilogue episode.
Yes, which I really appreciate because it does feel
This is
like
a big
there
event.
needs to. This is a big event. It needs an epilogue.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they don't spend that much time on the
It's
whole
less of an
rebuilding of Earth, but it does tie up the loose end with Starscream and Arkville.
Yeah. It feels more shenanigans than anything else.
Yeah, there's a lot of shenanigans in this episode. The episode called Countdown to Extinction.
Yeah.
In which Starscream uses Dr. Arkville and his exponential generator to create a bomb capable of destroying the Earth. They then go to Cybertron to collect the resulting energy storm. Megatron returns and takes the Decepticons to eliminate the schemer, and the Autobots attempt to stop both. Optimus and Megatron get rid of the exponential generator, while Starscream returns to Earth to find out why it didn't blow up and is captured by Megatron.
So, I think my favorite part of this episode is the beginning,
Yes.
when it shows ruined Earth. Like,
Mhm.
it's a whole city
Yes.
just destroyed.
Oh, and in the recap, this is the one and only time we see Cybertron from a different angle in all of season 1, and I think
Yeah.
most of season 2. Season 3 has a few different depictions of Cybertron, and some of them match what we see in this episode.
Right.
Where it actually shows the explosion and Cybertron moving out of Earth's orbit from a different angle, which kind of looks better than the silly slide across the screen Cybertron in the previous episode. But yeah, this is like the one and only time that we get to see Cybertron from a different angle, and it's in a recap.
Right.
But I guess
Take what I can get.
it's not really a recap as much as it is a narration, and I mean, I guess it recaps, but it also sets up the Autobots helping to rebuild Earth. But what's funny is we don't see any human construction crews. I imagine that the death toll
was catastrophic.
was catastrophic. You must help us. You must contact me. And soon we'll open up an email where you can contact us. Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. You can cut this out if we decide not to put out our email.
Who knows?
Yeah, anyway. But yeah, so
But you see the Transformers like all pitching in together and like using their abilities to do stuff.
Yeah,
and, like,
yeah.
Seeing the Dinobots like move a whole building
right.
upright and stuff.
Ironhide using some slidey arm tech.
Yeah. There's a lot in this that feels there's a comic run from the IDW series All Hail Megatron
Yeah.
that I feel like has more in line with Megatron's master plan than it does this, but this part reminded me specifically of that, of like the ruined city.
Yeah.
And them helping to rebuild and stuff. But yes, there are no humans to be seen because probably a lot of them died.
Yeah. But something else that we do see, how do you like that transition, is a new character that has not been introduced in the show up to this point. Here we are, almost to the end of season 1, and we finally see Frenzy!
Frenzy!
Who is
Red!
The time-honored
debate
of which of the two Cassetticons that Soundwave has, Rumble's been the main one so far.
And in the cartoon, he's colored this kind of lavender, purple, blue color.
Yeah. And then they introduce Frenzy, who is black and red.
Yeah.
Same design and everything as Frenzy.
Probably the same voice actor.
Has the same, like, thunder pylons and stuff.
Right.
But he's red and black.
Yeah.
Depending on what continuity, in the comics, they swap the color scheme.
Right. I believe the original toy, the color scheme is also the opposite.
The Frenzy
But I'm
is
not sure.
purple and
Some,
Rumble is
all right,
red.
some of the toys release...
That's the thing. It changes almost every single time.
Right. Some of the toys, Rumble is red and Frenzy is blue. Some of the toys, Rumble is blue and Frenzy is red. So...
This is like...
And to be fair, they are more of characters in the cartoon than they are in the comics, where they're just kind of cannon fodder.
Yeah, Rumble is kind of like... He's like a school bully, essentially. He's just a punk.
Yeah.
Frenzy's more of like renegades, like... I guess it's better. It's like Rumble's the school bully.
Yeah.
Frenzy's the street punk.
Yeah.
Who just hates everybody.
And speaking of people just appearing, Megatron appears with no explanation.
It is so funny because he shows up, like literally just walks in the door as the Decepticons are rebuilding their base.
Yeah.
And like getting into scuffles with each other.
Yeah.
It is really cool also to see that the Autobots are all working together and getting stuff done.
Yeah.
The Decepticons having to do something productive.
Yeah.
They're just tripping over each other,
Yeah.
insulting each other, beating each other up, and it is cool to see that everyone's in recovery at this point. Because the Decepticons' base got trashed as well by all the natural disasters.
Yeah.
But then Megatron just stepping through the door, saying, "Silence!"
Yeah.
And he's just there. And everyone's like, "We thought you were dead." And he's like, "Think again."
Yeah.
And moves on.
And later, Shockwave says that Megatron's indestructible, and apparently he literally is just indestructible.
It's like, no, he can never die. It's like, yeah, that's the idealistic thing. It's like, no, he's actually indestructible.
I checked. See, this is why Shockwave is loyal in the comics compared to disloyal. He's loyal in the cartoon compared to being disloyal in the comics, is because Megatron is literally indestructible.
Yeah. In the comics, Megatron's insane more often than not. And here, he's just indestructible.
But on the other end of destructibility, we have Dr. Arkeville's lair.
Oh, yes. Brilliantly.
I love how he just has a mad scientist lair in a mountain with a giant Transformer-sized stone door that opens to the words, "Open Sesame."
Not even Open Sesame. It has to be, "I, Dr. Arkeville, genius of science, say, open sesame."
It just perfectly goes back to that thing I was saying about he's one of Superman's classic villains.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Flair for the dramatic.
Yeah.
Random resources that he really shouldn't have.
Right. Yeah.
But I do like that Starscream just taking the stone and then chucking it up against the mountain and threatening Arkeville with that.
Yeah.
He's a lot more unhinged in this episode.
Yeah.
I feel. And way more cruel than usual.
Yeah.
He does feel like kind of a rogue agent that's dangerous to everybody sort of thing.
Yeah. And since they're both scientists, I like that you point this out, that they're both scientists, that they do have that connection.
Yeah.
And that might also stir part of their rivalry too.
Right.
You know?
I can't stand you being smarter than me.
Right. Exactly.
But it also kind of feeds into that Starscream's so quickly able to understand the exponential generator.
Yeah.
And
which you so elegantly put as the waveform egg football.
Yeah.
Which later on it does become a football.
It does. But again, showing just how resourceful Arkeville is, he just has an exponential generator in his back pocket.
He could have just used that the whole time instead of wrecking
Easily could have solved the Decepticons' whole energy crisis.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're gonna do
You could have
this.
solved the Earth's energy crisis.
Yeah. This all could have been solved if Megatron had said, "We're bringing Cybertron into Earth's orbit so that we can harvest the energy from it."
Yeah.
Arkeville could have said, I have an exponential generator, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Really, this was a whole misunderstanding.
I mean, that's really, if you think about that, that's what makes villain scientists villains, is that they keep all of their inventions for themselves instead of for the greater good of humanity.
It's brilliantly summarized in the panel from a Spider-Man comic where he's talking to the villain Sauron, who is a giant pterodactyl man.
Yeah, not the Dark Lord of Lord of the Rings.
Amazingly enough, in universe, he named himself after that.
Really? Wow.
It's amazing.
Okay, then.
But Spider-Man says, you're using this DNA rewriting you're rewriting DNA on the fly. You could use this technology to cure cancer, not turn people into dinosaurs. He says, but I don't want to cure cancer. I want to turn people into dinosaurs.
I love that meme. That's such a good meme. But yeah, speaking of memes, Starscream is a meme. I mean, he has completely lost it. His plan. All right. His plan is to set a 7-hour timer on this exponential generator so that it will build to infinite capacity and blow up the Earth. In that 7 hours, he plans to fly to Cybertron, which admittedly is in Earth's
now.
solar system. It's not like he's flying to some other galaxy or something, or interstellar space. He is flying, but still, it takes months just to get to the moon. He's going to fly all the way to Cybertron, which at this point is probably still hurtling away.
Yeah. It's getting further by the second.
Yeah. And then just hope that he has the means to cattle the energy from the Earth's destruction. Like, is this something he's done before? Has he moved Cybertron into other planets and destroyed them? And maybe this is something that the Cybertronians have done.
Skyfire have done.
Right. Maybe this is something that Cybertronians have done in the past. Like, they have these energy collectors already set up on Cybertron, and they just blow up a planet and suck all the energy. Like Unicron.
Right.
You know?
But all of this might make a little bit of sense. Were it not for the fact that he sets the timer while he's explaining the plan. So he's like, so I'm going to set the timer like this. Oh, now we have 7 hours. You don't want to spend a little more time to prep or anything?
Yeah, but you gotta admit, Lord Starscream, Tyrant of the Firmament is a fantastic title.
Oh, yeah. It's like, none of his plan makes sense, and then he says, I'll be Lord Starscream, Tyrant of the Firmament, and it's like, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. What's not as cool, you mentioned the Autobot Decepticons.
There's a little, like, the Decepticons are chasing down Starscream, and the Autobots are chasing the Decepticons. Mm-hmm. And, which, again, also, Megatron's like, I need to find Dr. Arkeville. You said he was of no use to you!
Yeah. What is up with that? He just completely forgets that he doesn't need him anymore.
But, there's a little scuffle. It's not even like a fight. It's just a little, like, throw a few punches and then, like,
I do find
WrestleMania.
It really interesting, though, that Wheeljack says, I don't want to hide, I want to fight in the clear. And it's like, the Autobots disagree with Prime, and to what end, are they just battle hungry, or is this like revenge for what the Decepticons did to Earth?
I think
that's interesting, because they are helping repair it, and they do care about Earth at this point. So maybe it is revenge. They're like, hey, this is our chance to pound them for what they did to Earth.
Yeah.
You know?
I always thought it was just because Wheeljack's a maniac.
I mean, that's also true.
Yeah. But it just...
And then they get stuck in quicksand in the Valley of No Return.
Yeah. Why does Megatron know about this place? He's like, a little place called the Valley of No Return. It's just a pit of quicksand.
Yeah. Also quicksand.
Yeah.
Every 80s cartoon has to have quicksand at some point.
It's the most dangerous thing on the planet.
Oh, yeah, of course.
But it feels like a fantasy name. Like
Yeah.
I do. One of my favorite parts of this is that Starscream shows up to tell Shockwave on Cybertron that he's the new leader of the Decepticons.
Yeah.
He whips out this like laminated Decepticon symbol, like a badge. Sort of thing.
I love the idea that the Autobots have this mystical item, the Autobot matrix of leadership, passed down from Primus, from leader to leader, signifying the divine right of kings, basically, right? The Decepticons have a badge.
Yeah.
They have a little baseball card.
And Shockwave, it's not so, like, you could easily make something like that.
Right.
But Shockwave's like, what?
Yeah.
It's like, you have that.
But how did Starscream get it? If Megatron had it, and it blew up with him in the spaceship, how did Starscream get it?
He just raided Megatron's locker.
Maybe, yeah.
But this whole episode, I think the best part of it has got to be what happens to Dr. Arkeville.
What an interesting arc, man.
Very interesting.
He gets way in over his head by teaming up with the Decepticons in the first place.
Yeah.
And then everything just goes against him from there.
Yeah, he's almost tragic in this episode.
Yeah.
Where he feels very like Frankenstein, like tormented by his own creations.
Yeah.
And
we don't ever get to see what happened to the other slaves that are presumably on Cybertron, but we do get to see what happened to him, and probably something similar that happened
and that
to him.
His arc is ultimately caring for Earth more than himself.
Yeah, he does learn, which goes back to what I was saying about what makes a villain scientist is that they care more about themselves and their discoveries than actually using it to help Earth. And in this, he finally switches sides.
Yeah, he full on throws himself into, like, you know, I may not be able to stop the Earth from being destroyed, but I can stop.
I can at least screw Starscream.
But him getting, like, irreparably damaged from that.
Yeah.
Again, terrifying.
And then he got so... his life was so in jeopardy from the Sentinel monitor that Starscream had to have his creepy Metacroids.
What are Metacroids?
Metacroids. Ugh. This just sounds creepy.
Yeah. They couldn't fix him.
Yeah, they had to rebuild him into even more machine than he already was.
Yeah, as he says,
and
you've turned me into a mechanical freak!
Yeah. And, okay, my question is, are his limbs usable? Is he clamped down to that wheelchair he's in? Or
I think he's part of the wheelchair.
Yeah, that's also what I feel like is going on here. Like
the rest of his body's just
he can only
decorative.
He can move around and he can use his hands a little bit.
Yeah.
But that's about it.
I do like that he still maintains his fabulous nails.
Yes. He but since he can't use his body to fight Starscream anymore, now he's going to use his mind, and he tricks him into going back to Earth.
And I love that it's not played in like a, oh man, he's getting what he deserves, like a comeuppance sort of thing. It's really tragic and played straight for the most part. Like his panic and Starscream's like cruel disregard for how like he's terrified at the concept of being... I think he's...
Yeah, the part where he's flying away from Earth to Cybertron and he just says, Starscream, I implore you!
The thought of my planet being destroyed is intolerable.
He's on the verge of a panic attack.
Yeah.
And Starscream even says, you should be honored to be the last of your kind. Apparently the other humans that went to Cybertron are no longer there for some reason. According to Starscream, we don't actually know.
They might have just been killed off.
Yeah, exactly. But or maybe they were killed in the explosion that pushed Cybertron away, right? But yeah, so Arkaville thinks he's about to be the last of his species, and he's on roller skates.
Yeah. And how do you suppose I'll get there? On my roller skates!
But yeah, I love that he tricks Starscream into going back to check.
Yeah.
When the timer doesn't go off, he tricks him into going
His
back.
smile when he realizes that he's like, remember, you're the only one who knows how the device works.
Yeah, and Starscream...
And that's the last shot of him, is that little smile.
Yeah. And Starscream's face where he's just like...
he's right.
He's right. But we never know what happens to him after that. I'm sure there's comics and short stories and stuff. But as far as the cartoon is concerned, we never hear about him again after
Never
this.
see him again, never hear from him.
It's so strange. In a modern show, there's going to be continuity. He's going to come back, whatever.
We're going to get the Dr. Arkaville spin-off show.
I actually really like that we have no idea what happens to him after this point.
It's plausible to think that Shockwave just used him in like, or Shockwave used him in an experiment or something. But the possibilities, man.
Yeah.
But
speaking of possibilities, apparently it's possible for Optimus to just uppercut Megatron out of nowhere. Megatron gets to the base. And then he's alerted that the Autobots have arrived. They've escaped from the quicksand. And he comes out and he's like looking around like, where are they? And Optimus's fist comes from below screen and punches Megatron out of nowhere. This is like Looney Tunes level.
There's literally no place that he could have been hiding.
Right. It's so funny.
And then also, like, he's just so jolly in this sequence.
Yeah. Because he doesn't know what's at stake. He doesn't know that the world's about to be blown up again.
And then he gets to the exponential generator. And I love, like, the Optimus Megatron back and forth of, like, tense dynamic where they both realize we're kind of in danger.
Shockwave calls at the last moment. And it's like, Megatron, you have to... Also, the fact that Shockwave calls him and is like, you've got to find this place.
Like, Megatron!
Yeah, but he's like, you've got to find the lab and deactivate the bomb. There's 1 second left on the bomb. It is so lucky that they were there.
And Megatron just nonchalantly rips it off the wall.
Because if he had gotten that call without looking for the base, he had to scour the entire globe for this base.
Yeah.
You know?
I do like that you put about Megatron being lost in his work.
Yeah. I think this is once again a rare glimpse into Megatron's deeper side, that he actually does, like, he knows what's at stake. He knows if there's no more Earth, like, he can't get what he wanted originally, but if there's no more Earth, he's going to go down with it,
right?
You know? But beyond that, like, there's something there. He cares about, like, his troops or something, because he is so lost in his work that
I always read that as, like, he's power hungry, but he's actually, like, enamored by power of any kind.
That's
because there's the one shot where he's looking at it and
it's just
reflected in his eyes, and it's like, ooh,
yeah,
and he's like, you're to serve me, my potent beauty, like that and stuff, and it's like, it kind of feels like it's just power of any kind,
right?
He's like,
right, but I think it's something in the way that he says to Optimus, Prime, I've been lost in my work. He's just now realizing it.
Yeah.
So, like,
and it's melted his housing as he's holding it.
Yeah. And he says, I'll deal with that soon enough. But Prime doesn't trust him. He still thinks that Megatron is going to try to steal it for himself.
Yeah.
Because Prime thinks that he's the only one that realizes it's still going to blow, right?
Right.
But Megatron actually does realize that it's going to blow. I think that it was his plan all along to take it outside and shoot it in space.
Probably.
Right?
I do like the dynamic of, like, they both don't trust each other,
right?
Which could have been their downfall,
right?
But
then Megatron is the one who says, "Prime, no time to argue. You need to load this cannon, which is me, and fire it into space." Right?
A great shot in any show is
when
Optimus wielding Megatron as a weapon.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, but I always love when Optimus and Megatron get to team up. You know, because I do think that in this situation, you know, Optimus is constantly chiding Megatron about, like, oh, you're just power hungry. Like you said.
Yeah.
You think it's just he's lost in his power fantasies, right?
He's deeper than that, though.
Right. I think that, you know, Megatron, he realizes that, yeah, my quest for power almost blew me and the Earth up.
Yeah.
You know, I need the Earth. There's more I can get out of it.
Exactly.
Right? And, yeah. Ends justify the means for Megatron, but in this particular instance, he's like, "Yeah, I've just been lost in my work. I haven't been thinking clearly this whole episode."
Maybe that, that could be him reflecting on the past, like, few
weeks. Even the Ultimate Doom story arc. You know, I've been lost in my work. You know, I didn't realize what I could have, you know, lost in all. He's
like,
this,
yeah, I've been a little confused.
Not that he cares for humans or anything like that. You know,
right?
Not that he cares for the Earth, but he knows. He doesn't want to lose a resource.
He was like, my bad.
Right. But anyway,
also they
and then they shoot it
that up.
They shoot it into space, which we've already established that they can shoot into space, apparently.
True.
But you want to say it or should I?
It is the most wimpy, world-ending explosion ever.
It's so funny.
It's literally just.
Yeah, that's just this little tiny explosion. Like,
I also love that it sails past Starscream's head, and he's just like, "What the?"
Yeah. Also, the fact that Starscream, in the vastness of space, Starscream happened to be in the exact same spot where, I mean, to be fair, he was heading to the same place that it just came from. But it's funny that out of all of space, it hit close enough to knock him out of the sky and land on the thing. And dang, Starscream is definitely dead meat. And the Autobots just laugh about it.
I feel like this starts a grand tradition of Starscream being pulled off screen and never knowing what happens to him.
Yeah.
And then he just shows up in the next episode or not.
Except this one. Because the next episode is the Insecticons one, and I don't think he's in that episode.
Yeah.
He does show up in the final episode of season 1. But it's just kind of funny,
it's like, what did he do? There's an episode of Transformers Prime where he literally drags him off screen, like kicking and screaming.
That's the end of one episode.
And then the next episode starts with him just like absolutely trashed on the stretcher.
Yeah. Speaking of later media, I was thinking while I was watching part 1 of Ultimate Doom, as we wrap up, because we're basically done with all of our episode analysis here. So I'm just going to throw in one little note, is that the Ultimate Doom, I was thinking, this could really do well with a modern adaptation remake in one of the current series, right?
This concept.
This concept, it could be great, especially with the writing on Optimus Prime. All of these concepts we've discussed in a modern show would probably delve a lot into the, character development that's being, only subtext here, right? And then I remembered, oh yeah, it was the third Michael Bay movie, Dark of the Moon. Yeah,
and it's like, you would think that they didn't, apparently.
I also thought, you could even combine this with Megatron's master plan and have, part of the mind control thing is also Megatron trying to trick humans into, oh yeah, it was Dark of the Moon.
They basically mash those two plot lines together.
Yeah,
I don't know how well they worked.
It's been a while since I've seen it.
I just remember it was long. It was so long.
And it was... Okay. It was on TV, right? I actually got up and left the room at one point because I was so done with it. And then I came back and it was still cringe. And then eventually it got to Transformers. I finally got to be about Transformers. But we'll tackle those when we get to them. Maybe I'll have a different opinion on them. I imagine some of my opinions will still stand, but...
I, for one, am very excited to get to those movies.
Yeah, in 5 years?
Yeah.
But anyway, I do think that in Transformers Prime, the One Shall Stand story arc, I think it is, kind of captures the same mood of Ultimate Doom.
Yeah, there's the Omega Lock and...
No, not that one. The one where... spoiler alert, skip ahead about 3 seconds. Unicron is causing problems for Earth.
There's tones of it.
Yeah,
sort of
I feel like it captures the same mood of, oh crap, things are going down, there's dark clouds everywhere, and doomsday and stuff like that. So I feel like it is in the same vein as this. But so we do actually see this crop up in later Transformers media. Yeah. But... Speaking of... Nah, that transition's not going to work.
There's no transition there.
All right, so let's go on to our segments. Yeah, play the little... Da-da-da-da-da.
Best quotes and weird robot lingo.
Yes.
So for Ultimate Doom Part 1...
what did you put?
Oh gosh, it's when Sparkplug first gets captured and Spike looks up and then he just... He just says in the most dry, monotone way possible, "The Decepticons have captured my dad." It's like, yeah, buddy.
yeah, that's exactly what just happened. Thank you for telling us. I couldn't have figured that out.
Yeah. Another great one, Prime just saying, "That does not satisfy my logic circuits."
I need to say that whenever somebody gives a poor explanation of something.
And then for Part 1, I think it's just a great scene where the Seekers are scuffling and then Starscream says, "It was a waste of energy." And Skywarp retorts, "You waste more energy with your mouth." And he just, "Look, it just shoves him. He just has no retort.
He's not wrong. So I'm just going to shove him instead. Yeah. And then also when some of my favorite quotes from Part 1 is when Megatron calls Starscream a panic monger. It's like, "Relax, you panic monger." I just love the term panic monger. Yeah. And then Jazz's weird line when they jump into the ocean where he says, "Into the oven, best to be daring, last one in." Wait, I'm sorry, my spell checkers changed ocean to oven for some reason.
Into the ocean.
Yeah, into the ocean, best to be daring, last one in is a rusty bearing.
I was like, hey, it's a haiku.
Yeah, some sort of little poetry from Jazz. Cool. Then when they're going down to the Decepticon base and Bumblebee points out a scanner and Optimus just says, "Let's see if they can scan this," and shoots it.
If you don't understand it, just shoot it.
Yeah, exactly. And then Sparkplug's just completely line that goes so hard. Just, "I'm a mechanic. I know what I'm doing."
Somebody should put that in like an
I love-
edit or something.
Yeah. And then, of course, Megatron's iconic line, which he actually uses several times throughout the show, I believe. Parting is such sweet sorrow.
Shakespeare.
Yeah. I think he even says that in Transformers Devastation.
I think he does, yeah.
And moving on to part 2, what did you put?
Arkeville. Creating a mindless slave is simplicity itself.
We both put this one.
Of
Skyfire, when the Autobots get launched out of the volcano, he just declares, say it with me, Holy Halogeluminator!
What does it mean?
Love it. What's a Halogeluminator? But the absolute most hardcore line in the whole story arc that we just covered is when Spike has just lost his dad, right? Not to death, but to going and doing his thing. And Megatron is gloating, and he says, I'll have enough energy to power Cybertron forever, or something like that. And Spike says, with just this menacing look on his face, forever is shorter than you think, and then aims the space bridge thing at Megatron and shoots at him with that. It's just so good, man.
Spike has got the manifolds.
Yeah. Speaking of manifolds, I forget who says this, but mug your manifold.
Yeah.
Is another great line.
Part 3, Brawn. It's all Brawn in this one. It's just, the Decepticons then got him cornered and says, I don't suppose I could interest any of you in a magazine subscription.
Yes, I also put that one.
And then, best timing is just, I'll get the door, creates a crater in the wall.
Yeah, he just runs through the door. I love that line. Yeah. And then also, when Shockwave yells at Skyfire, you cannot get out, shoots at him, he dodges, it blows up the door, and Skyfire says, I can now, and leaves. It's so good.
Great one-liners.
Yeah.
I love this line, too.
Megatron, when they...
My slaves will be torn apart in the dam.
When the hydroelectric thing is going to be destroyed by the tidal wave, Megatron just says, I thought humans liked to play in the ocean. And then Ironhide says he wants to give him a nickel-knuckle sandwich.
Nickel-knuckle sandwich.
And of course, you got to get in the classic laser breath. And I think that Spike calls Shockwave laser breath or something. Yeah. And then, of course, the fantastic "Never quit on the people you love" line is just it reeks of sentiment, but it's so good.
Mushy, but true.
Exactly. And in the final episode, Countdown to Extinction,
as I believe the humans say, lay it on me, man.
Love
Optimus.
Love it. I also like...
he's a groovy dude.
I think it's Rumble says something about one of the way... No, I'm sorry. Huffer says to Ironhide that or Brawn or somebody... Huffer chides one of the other Autobots and says... If you don't hurry up with that, we're going to be here till the Big Dipper gets rusty. And then also Skywarp calls...
I think it's Rumble, right?
Rumble, yeah, a metallic mini meatball. And then somebody calls him... I don't know exactly what he says, but it sounds like he calls him a Nazi turkey. Like, what the heck?
A Nazi turkey. It's pretty effective.
My favorite, I love this line from when they open Dr. Arkeville's lab. He says that it can only be activated by voice command, and Starscream tells him to activate your mouth. I love it.
He just leaned over him, just ugh.
And we also already covered Lord Starscream, Tyrant of the Firmament.
It was good.
Yep. So who's your favorite character in this episode?
It can only be one. It's Dr. Arkeville.
Yeah, he is kind of the MVP of this.
Yeah.
Though I actually think that Spike does a lot of really neat things. He conveys the story in an interesting way. So it's interesting. I think the human characters on both sides actually play some of the biggest roles in this story arc.
Yeah, it's either Arkeville or Brawn for me, but Brawn's like every episode.
Yeah. One note I didn't point out in Countdown to Extinction is that Dr. Arkeville, Spike is not included in Countdown to Extinction. He probably went on a vacation with his dad.
Yeah. Have some fun.
So, magic hand tech.
Magic hand sliding technology.
Your favorite section.
There really wasn't much. There was a little bit of hand slides in, and it's just the hole.
Yeah.
And then it shoots something out. But Ironhide seems to be the MVP of this. He has like a floor plunger looking thing that he just shoots onto the ground. And it could be an extension of his Sonadar sensor from the Dinobots, but I don't know. There wasn't much.
And then there's also
this section will get much smaller in the coming episodes.
And then there's also Rumble's eyeball extension.
Yeah, it's in the same category.
Yeah. So another piece of slidey hand tech, though it's not part of their hands, I guess. Bumblebee almost like self-changes his tire when he gets the flat in the second episode of Ultimate Doom. He jacks himself up, and then the nuts from the wheel pop off. All Spike has to do is he also throws the spare tire out of the trunk. All Spike has to do is carry the tire and then swap them out, and then Bumblebee basically takes care of everything else. How useful would that be if we could just like
have the car do the work?
Yeah, number one, have the car do the work, most of the work for us. But also, like, how does that translate to humans? Like, I broke my toe. Let me just take it off.
So you can fix it.
So you can fix it or something.
It does beg the question of, like, how much of a Transformer is the body and how much is just external stuff that can be removed and taken off?
That's a good question.
Because, like, are tires essentially like clothes where, if a Transformer was, quote-unquote, naked,
right,
would they not have tires? They wouldn't have, like, nuts and bolts on them?
Well, we see that in later series with, like, the protoforms and stuff. Because, like, or the stripped-down versions of Transformers before they scan in alternate mode sometimes. They don't have some of their vehicle mode stuff.
Birthday suit Transformers.
Right. Or their Cybertronian modes or something like that. They have, like, a leaner version.
Yeah.
And that's usually something we see in the 2D series, because a lot of the 3D series just make them look the same, but they turn into something else.
Right. Because 3D models, it's harder to change on the fly than a 2D model, to where you can just be like, just take off a chunk of his character model and we'll call it a day.
Just draw him different is
they're
apparently less expensive than, change the 3D model, remove these pieces.
There's a distinct trend of Cybertronian form of something is just like bog standard, and then Earth form is like kibblified with just a bunch of like added stuff and parts just thrown on top.
Right. I just always thought it was kind of a weird part where he just starts throwing parts off of him and stuff, without having to touch them. Like the screws unscrew themselves.
Yeah, there's just
or the wheel nuts unscrew themselves.
Laws of magnetism do not apply.
Right. It's like, how does that work? Are the screws like connected or something? Do they have their own computer systems in them, or like what? Where
is
does
Bumblebee made of screws, or are screws made of Bumblebee? He screams, for he does not know.
And then Optimus just like, wow, why didn't we think of how this to have this in all of our cars? Because driving through the rain, he says, I'll just reverse the polarity of my windshields or something like that, so that it deflects the rain.
What does it mean?
That's something. And then also Jazz just magnetically stuck on Ironhide's bumper.
Cruising on your caboose.
Moving on.
Yeah.
And any noteworthy or favorite errors?
Goodness. The animation in part 1 and part 3 is so janky.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough. Part 2 is pretty good.
Yeah.
It's just oh boy. it's a little rough all around in these episodes, but I think it's obviously got to be Cybertron just scooting.
Scooting. Yeah, that one's pretty bad. It's pretty funny though too, and it's like I don't know how they would have done it that would have made it look better, because like if they put a spin on it, it would have looked even funnier. It's just I don't know. There's just no winning in that one, I think. But I also want to point out that what I've dubbed Ulchtar, because Ulchtar was the original name for Starscream before they changed it, thankfully. And I call if there's ever a Starscream where there's not supposed to be a Starscream, I call him Ulchtar.
It's Ulchtar.
He shows up in episode 2, I think.
Yeah.
Or it might be episode 3, because that's the chase sequence, and I think he's in the chase sequence. And then Spike's running animation throughout,
moves so fast.
All throughout part 3 is just so funny looking. He's either like doing this weird noodle run or like this like super angled Naruto run or something.
Like,
you know? Yeah, it's just so funny. And with that,
TF Wiki.
Yeah, let's take a short break and we'll come back for our TF Wiki segment. Okay, so on to our TF Wiki Go Button Trivia segment, where we click on the Go button, the random page button on TF Wiki, and find an interesting article to glance over and give y'all a little taste of.
Yeah. So mine is Computron. Not really the most obscure, but he's one of the combiners introduced in season 3 of Transformers. He's got a pretty cool backstory too, with being created from the Grimlock's brief stint as a super genius.
Yes.
But most of the combiners are usually like big powerhouses with not a whole lot of personality. It's usually just like rah, like that. But Computron's unique in that he has the combined intellect of all of the Technobots, which are in and of themselves super geniuses in their own right.
Sort
of. But they all combine to make a combiner who is the smartest out of all of them. And he's pretty unique in that most other combiners are usually on the dumber side.
Yeah.
Like, the strain of having to form a single consciousness from 5 individual combiners means that they have a lot of brawn but not a lot of brains.
So anything particular on his page that you want to point out to us?
Mainly, I do really like this one line that he has in the comics where he says, "Brawn without brains ill becomes a warrior, Decepticon. You're too data deficient to even comprehend what this acid pellet gun is going to do to you."
Wow.
But the main thing that made me pick him is because I didn't realize this, but in the Titans Return show, he is voiced by one Matthew Patrick, MatPat of Game Theory YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that's just a theory. A game theory.
What a weird choice.
Yeah. And honestly, like, he does a pretty good job with it, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that hard. Computron talks like a computer out of an old 50s movie.
Yeah. Another interesting thing is that he also makes an appearance as a boss in the Transformers PlayStation 2 game that was unreleased.
Which one? The Japanese one or the...
the Transformers PS2. It's the Japanese one with like the G1.
Okay, so the one that never got released in the US.
Yeah,
but it does exist, right?
Yeah. No, it exists.
Yeah, interesting. That's right, because that uses a lot of season 3 characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
He also is made up of his torso is made up of Scattershot, who is probably one of my favorite characters. The namesake of one of my favorite characters from the Transformers Cybertron show.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Totally different. He's not a Technobot there.
He's not at all, but I just like that that's where the name came from.
Yeah, that's the interesting era where they were just using names and not like reusing
whatever
characters or robots. And now we can't escape from them just copying the original characters.
Yeah. He's also the victim of an inordinate amount of animation errors because of his character model not having like a lot of... It's just badly drawn from like the reference model. So he's just very inconsistent on like where a drill is or where a cockpit is and stuff.
So my TF Wiki page is Transformer clothing.
Transformers clothing.
Yeah,
this is a fun one.
The main line on this one says, one way that non-Transformer species seem to have influenced Cybertron culture is the relatively rare occurrence of Transformers wearing clothing. And we got a picture of one of the older comic covers.
Oh, Nightbeat.
That shows Nightbeat, who is an Autobot detective, in a full Transformer-sized trench coat, wearing a fedora, and it looks like shades, but I think Nightbeat also just generally looks like he's got shades.
What's wild about this image
standing
is
on
that
a beach.
He has shoulder like pad things, and the coat goes over them.
Yes, it's hilarious.
He's got this giant pylon sticking out of his coat.
And we've also got a image of Optimus and Megatron from one of the Japanese series wearing pretty fashionable capes.
Capes are exquisite in Transformers.
I find it interesting that this is sort of like a separate thing from like Pretenders, because Pretenders, you know, they've got like this human or monster shell that goes over them, and then those shells are also wearing clothes, but usually it's like some sort of armor. It's not usually like a cape or something.
Yeah.
But capes and ponchos and stuff have been all over the place. We've got here on the page here a whole section for capes, trench coats, ponchos, Pretenders. Oh, they are a section on here. Headwear, cosplay, which shows a picture from like I think it's like some sort of like birthday party thing from the 80s where people dressed as Transformers would go to a birthday party or something.
Yeah.
Others. We've mentioned in the original, the first More Than Meets the Eye, part 3, I think it is, when the Autobots all wore lab coats in their hologram, which is just hilarious and funny. Some of the toys even come with clothing, specifically like Starscream's cape that he had in the 1986 movie, or the transforming Darth Vader Death Star also has a cape. So a couple of examples I'll just read.
There's also a great image from one of the comics that shows that Megatron's like helmet thing is an actual helmet.
Yeah.
And underneath he has like a Dilophosaurus frill looking thing.
Yeah, kind of interesting that.
Yeah.
Of course there's the crown that Starscream wears that gets mimicked all the time.
Oh yeah. Crowns are
sometimes
huge.
Sometimes Grimlock has that because he also wore a crown in the Marvel comics.
Him Grimlock, him King.
So I'll just read the top one from each segment.
Yeah.
In the capes section, the capes department, Optimus and Megatron wore capes while serving as leaders of the Cybertron Alliance. Prime's was purple, the Decepticon color, while Megatron's was red, the Autobot color. Whether this was a symbol of high office or just a desire to look pretty is unknown.
I like how it actually says, because fabrics are probably really rare on Cybertron, someone having a cape is probably like huge status.
Trench coats. Nightbeat is often seen wearing a trench coat and fedora due to their connection with detective fiction. He pulls it off pretty well, actually. Ponchos. The Matrix Flame Priest wears poncho-style robes.
Huh. And of course, Lockdown, very famously.
Yeah, Lockdown. There's a picture of Lockdown from Animated. I also feel like Scavenger in Armada wore a poncho, but maybe that qualifies as a cape.
Yeah, it was more of like a hood and cloak.
Yeah, that's right. You're right. He had a hood. Headwear. Megatron and Sunstreaker wore battle masks during gladiatorial combat in state games. Interesting. Cosplay. The BotBots, Coffeemus Prime, Scribzilla, and Captain Cartridge are all into cosplay, dressing up whenever they attend a convention.
Are we gonna move past Coffee Miss Prime?
Yeah, that's one of the cartoons, BotBots.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know what it is, really. I've tried to understand, but
I love
we'll
how
get
they
there
put
one
this,
day, I guess.
in an
Because
early
it is
plan.
animated, so we have to watch
Yeah.
it.
In an early plan to trap the Decepticons, the Autobots had to run around in lab coats. It was very silly.
And that'll about do it for the TF Wiki page Go Button Trivia segment, which leads us to the end of this episode. Next time, we are covering episodes 15 and 16 of Generation 1.
Nice.
A Plague of Insecticons and Heavy Metal War, as well as the short PSAs and discussing our plans for Season 2.
Oh man, I love the PSAs.
At the time of this recording, these Transformer episodes are available on the Hasbro Pulse YouTube channel, as well as on DVD and several other streaming services, as we mentioned earlier. Thank you all for joining us and listening to
Please
us
do
ramble.
watch the show as well.
It's fantastic.
It's really good.
You know, it's just
It's a fun time.
it's so fun.
But anyway, I am Hayden,
I'm Frankie.
and we are the BroBots in disguise, and we'll return after these short messages. But actually, we won't, because this
After
is the
many
episode.
messages.
After a lot of messages, we'll be back at some point. Thanks for
Take
listening,
care.
y'all.